All right.
Hey, what's going on? This is my first time in one of this one's the COVID, it's open to the public, right? Do they just hang out here?
Yeah. What we
It's not unless they don't have access to technology. Or, because we don't have anybody providing
How do we
public comment.
verify that?
Yeah, I guess as long as they social distance, but
Okay. So but this is their designated area to hang out?
Yeah, what we should do is just put chairs 6 feet apart.
Sure. Okay.
They're
Amy Miller looks all official there with her headset on. You gonna be talking a lot tonight or something? You ready?
So you don't hear the dogs in the background.
Got it.
Yeah, well, this is the first week that since I'm back in public affairs. Though I honestly think, and it's up to you, obviously, to stay with what's going on lately, it may be appropriate to have you today anyways. Absolutely. You told me where to go. Yeah, no, that's why I prefer to be. I do not want to be on camera.
So if you guys can just figure out the way to
Sit here on the other side of this.
Yeah,
post and
that's
say on
fine.
camera.
Yeah, and you can pull the chairs out so you can talk. I'll let you know if we have anything.
You gonna be ready to get started here? It's 5:45.
oh, I've got a few minutes.
Are we ready?
Ready.
Good evening. Welcome to the third Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020, Lawrence City Commission. Before we begin, we will have Porter give us some instruction on the technology associated with tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. My name is Porter Arneal, and as Mayor Ananda said, I'll be here facilitating the Zoom video portion of the meeting. With me is Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk. She'll work alongside Mayor Ananda to facilitate the meeting proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. Yeah, we got more people coming in. During the meeting, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting will make it easier for everyone to hear. You'll just have to remember to unmute if and when you want to speak. In some cases, I may mute or unmute people as needed. Each time you speak, please remember to state your name and title for the benefit of those listening remotely. In the menu, you can also turn your camera on or off by clicking the video icon. For the purposes of this public meeting, please keep your video on during the meeting. If you're participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen you will see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker, while gallery view tiles all the meeting participants. Now I'll turn the meeting back to Mayor Ananda.
This is Mayor Ananda. Thank you, Porter. We will go ahead and do a roll call to make sure that all of our commissioners here and are able to communicate. Commissioner Shipley? Here. Vice Mayor Finkelday?
Here.
Commissioner Bully?
Here.
Commissioner Larson?
Here.
Okay, we are all present and accounted for. We will now hear from Sherry Riedemann some information specific to the procedure for this meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk, and I want to provide a few reminders to ensure that the provisions of the Kansas Open Meetings Act are met. Commissioners, you must state your name and title each time you speak. All motions will need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, the mayor will call on commissioners individually to provide their vote. Mayor, you will then need to announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. Various members of city staff are present via Zoom, and they must also state their name and title each time they speak. Members of the public are allowed to speak to certain agenda items, and these items are specifically noted on the meeting agenda. Individuals who signed up in advance to provide public comment remotely will be called upon by name. When you are called on, please unmute your listening device and state your name before speaking. The regular 3-minute time limit will apply. The mayor will then call for in-person public comment for those without access to technology options. Staff present will direct you to the podium to speak, following social distancing and safety protocols. The regular 3-minute time limit will apply. And again, I just want to remind everyone to please mute yourself when you are not speaking.
This is Mayor Ananda. Thank you, Sherry. So before we move into our agenda items, I want to make a statement about something very important this evening. To be clear, no words I speak here tonight are sufficient. No words I speak here about this unspeakable incident of police brutality and the ongoing violence being experienced by protesters will change what happened. Protesters continue to experience police brutality and violence from racist individuals and groups. Bystanders and business owners are suffering because rather than accepting the simple notion that Black lives matter and racism is a public health crisis and doing the work needed, communities, some officers, and our president are doubling down on their perception that the people expressing their suffering are the problem. Not only now, but in so many instances before. Not only in other states, other counties, other cities, but in this very city. Lawrence, Kansas is not immune to racist, violent actions against people of color generally and Black people specifically. We pride ourselves on the anti-racist history of our city, But in reality, we are no better than any other communities in this respect. We have to own that. We have to sit in that shame and deal with it, go through it, because until we do not create lasting, impactful change. Our systems are not broken. They are doing exactly what they were created to do. Our healthcare system, our economic engine, our criminal justice system, all of them systematically disenfranchise Black people, and the data bears this out. If we had no system for health, and someone proposed the healthcare system that we have, that proposal would be laughed out of the room. If we had no system for our economy, and someone proposed the economic system that we have, that proposal would be laughed out of the room. If we had no criminal justice system, and someone proposed the criminal justice system that we have, that proposal would be laughed out of the room. It is time for us as a nation to dream big. It is time for us as a city to dream big. We have to take a fresh look at the way that we do things and ask ourselves what we can do on a local level to change them. I am not so naive to think that our city government, without the cooperation of our county government, our state government, and our federal government, can solely make the kind of change that I'm talking about here. I know how the law works and the limits of local government. But I also know that by decreasing the fine for marijuana in our city, our county prosecutors cease prosecuting simple marijuana cases. We can have an impact, and we can set an example for the rest of our county, our state, and our country. It's what we do in Lawrence, Kansas. So tonight, I am here to make a call. I am calling in our white community to hold other white people accountable for the racism that permeates all of our lives, all of us, me, you, my fellow commissioners, and every single human in this community. Our many different intersectional identities benefit in some way based on our race, sex, education, income, sexual orientation, and gender and other identities. None of us are immune. There is and will be space for addressing the inequities faced by these other identities. But now is the time to acknowledge the pain of Black people caused by white people for 400 years and keep race centered in our conversation. I'm calling on you, Lawrence, to not let the death of George Floyd, to not let the abuse of privilege against Christian Cooper happen in vain, to not let the lives of so many Black men and women, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tamar Rice, Trayvon Martin, Oscar Grant, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, Samuel DuBose, Sandra Bland, Walter Scott, to just name a few, and so many others, go in vain. Say their names, know their names, let their stories propel you to action. We have done and are doing many things right in Lawrence. Our Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, or CJCC, has a racial and ethnic disparities work group, and forward momentum is happening with our disproportionate contact study having voluntary participation in all police departments in Douglas County, with training not only for the CJCC, but for recommendations for all criminal justice professionals. We have a health equity committee learning to center race and to move the needle on health inequities faced by our Black community, including low birth weights and lower life expectancies. We are hiring a director of equity and inclusion to guide our city through membership in our membership in the Governmental Alliance on Race and Equity and other initiatives that will center our city's commitment to real, impactful equity work. We experienced a mostly peaceful protest on Sunday, and while smaller local protests continue, our officers have been focusing on protecting the rights of those protesters and keeping them safe. There are many other initiatives, other partners, other organizations in this community doing this important work as well, some of which have been doing this work for decades. If you appreciate and are proud of our city for our equity work that has happened and is happening, and I am, give thanks to the people of color and activists who have been activists and advocates for these issues far longer than I have, far longer than it has been a regular conversation on the commission. I have the privilege of not having had to think about issues faced by Black people, even as a young activist. I have worked in fields including feminism, gay rights, and sexual and domestic violence that have historically marginalized the experiences of all people of color under the guise of equality for all. It is the social and emotional labor of these folks who forced us to see what we didn't know we didn't see. And even then, we didn't want to see it. What does it say that I could be well into college despite having called out racist uncles as a kid before I had a Black teacher, before I had to face my own racist thoughts and actions, before I realized the insular nature of my life? It's not uncommon coming from rural Kansas. If I can begin that work, you can too. This labor has been on the backs of Black people for too long. If you want to place blame for where our city sits in this work, however, that blame lies here. If we are in a position of political power, then we are responsible for leading. I recommit to working toward racial equity in Lawrence, and I challenge everyone in our community to do the same. We are ready to step up other initiatives. We have a community police review board, and I charged that committee with remobilizing to their mission, which includes advising the city on issues affecting the Lawrence Police Department, its policies, education, community outreach, and communications related to racial and other bias-based policing, and making progress and recommendations to the City Commission to ensure equity for our community. There are myriad resources on effective changes that have been made to policing that have a profound impact beyond training. These include reviewing our use of force policies, demilitarization, using predictive policing models to identify officers whose behaviors are not aligned with the standards and values our community expects, and investing in alternatives to policing, among others. Not only will reviews and recommendations like this keep our community safer, it keeps officers safer and better able to commit to their mission of serving our whole community and protecting our whole community. We have a Human Relations Commission whose mission includes endeavoring to eliminate prejudice among the various racial, ethnic, and other groups within the city to further goodwill among all people of Lawrence. To me, that begins with the very foundation upon which decisions are made by this commission, our ordinances. I charged the HRC with convening to create a plan to review the city's ordinances using the GARE toolkit and make recommendations to the commission regarding ordinances that disproportionately impact our Black residents and other persons with marginalized identities in our community. These two boards should work directly with the new Director of Equity and Inclusion and collaborate with each other as appropriate to ensure a holistic set of standards and coordinated timelines. Additionally, we have to continually remember to listen. Listen to the needs articulated to us by our community throughout this process and beyond, so that we can get things right this time, so that our children aren't having these same conversations again. I have a vision for our community in which no resident's outcome is determined by their race or other protected class. This is the mission of the Governmental Alliance on Race and Equity, or GARE, and it is my vision for our wonderful city. I want a community in which our residents all have an opportunity to thrive and participate, are safe, have access to housing, food, healthcare, jobs, and feel safe in their homes. This is not too much to ask, and it is what we all wish for the people that we love. Let's get to work, Lawrence. Thank you. So at this time, if any other commissioner wishes to make a statement, I would invite you to do so. I don't believe that anybody has come expecting that, but I did want to put that out there.
You know, Mayor Nanda, I did want to just say a few words. If you'll indulge me just for a few minutes, I'd appreciate it. I did post some of this on social media today, but I did want to put it in the public record. So in the past few weeks, I've watched, with utter sickness, the murder of George Floyd and the horrific pursuit and murder of Ahmaud Arbery. These are added to the long list of Black people who have been unjustly killed. They have paid the ultimate price due to racism, and millions more have been held down in poverty under the same name. My heart goes out to the families of Ahmaud and George and all others who have been unjustly killed or treated. You know, and just today, I've watched in complete disbelief as our president ordered the violent dispersal of a peaceful crowd and threatens to deploy the military against our citizens. This is unconscionable beyond pale, as far as I'm concerned. So I stand in solidarity with the protests that are happening nationwide and recently in Lawrence. And I implore all to continue to let your voice be heard in a peaceful manner and to not resort to any violent or destructive tactics against our community members or property. Instead, let's take this opportunity, as Mayor Ananda said, and find ways to protect and build up our community, to work to make wrongs right. I also want to commend those that protested on Sunday night in downtown Lawrence. I was at the protest for part of the night and only witnessed a peaceful but very serious gathering. It was great to see that most were wearing masks. During the protest, frustrations were vented in words, and I hear you. I heard the words. I would like to hear more on positive ways you believe that we can move forward, and I appreciate Mayor Nanda's contribution to some of those ways. I would also like to commend our police officers who were present there and for their limited and calm presence at the event, and the main public speakers that reminded us to not do any damage during the protests. Never forget that we are Lawrence. We are Lawrence, Kansas. You know, we take pride in our community, and we work really hard to keep it safe. This is a grand opportunity right now to make the changes that must occur. So let's find a way to come together to make these changes and make Lawrence a better place to live. Thank you.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldye. The inexcusable murder of George Floyd under the knee of a police officer was yet another reminder of the systemic racism in our country. A systemic racism that has been tolerated, though accepted for far too long, and one which our community gathered on Sunday night to protest and to demand an end to. I'm not quite as eloquent as Mayor Ananda and as those who spoke before me, but please be assured I've heard the demand for justice, heard from all of you, and I reaffirm that Black Lives Matter. We cannot solve systemic racism for the entire country, but we can make a difference here in our community, within our city government, within our police force, and most importantly, within ourselves. I pledge to listen, learn, and to do the hard work necessary to accomplish our shared goal.
This is Mayor Ananda. Thank you, Lisa and Brad, and all of our commissioners for showing up here tonight and being here with us, with our community as we move through this. If there is nothing else at this time, I would like to move forward with our agenda, acknowledging the heavy hearts with which we're doing this and the very serious conversations we're having this evening. Item A is approve our agenda. The City Commission reserves the right to amend, supplement, or reorder the agenda during the meeting. Are there any items that a commissioner wishes to modify or move on our agenda?
No.
Okay, do we have a motion then?
I move to approve the agenda.
This is Commissioner Boley, I second.
Sorry, Commissioner Larkin.
This is the soft first motion where we all get to practice remembering to say our name. This is Mayor Ananda again. We had a motion by Commissioner Larson, a second by Commissioner Bully. Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Finkeldye?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley? Aye. Mayor Ananda, aye. That passes unanimously. So with that, we are prepared to move into our consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Only those items noted with yellow highlight, bold print, and italics print are eligible for live public comment, and the public will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Are there any items that a member of the commission would like to pull from the consent agenda?
Mayor, Commissioner Shipley, B7E,
Any other items? Do we have a motion?
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldine. I move for approval of the consent agenda except for item B7E.
Commissioner Larson, second.
We have a motion. This is Mayor Nanda. We have a motion from Vice Mayor Finkeldine, a second from Commissioner Larson. Vice Mayor Finkeldine?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mayor Nanda, aye. So that passes unanimously. And now we will look at item B7E. Commissioner Shipley?
Mayor, Commissioner Shipley, I don't have anything to add to our discussion previously, only to be consistent in my voting against it.
Okay. Sherry, can you help me, this Mayor Nanda, can you help me with process here? We received, I want to see if I need to, because this is a yellow highlighted item, see if we need to ask for public comment if there is anyone present. I don't know if there's anyone present in the commission room.
We didn't have anyone sign up in advance, and there is not anyone in the commission room.
Thank you. So in that case, do we have a motion?
Commissioner Larson, I move to adopt on second final reading ordinance number 9767.
This is Commissioner Bully. I'll second that. Do you need more reading, more detail on that, Sherry?
We do not, thank you.
Great, thank you.
We have a motion from Commissioner Larson, a second from Commissioner Bully. This is Mayor Nanda. Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley?
Nay.
Vice Mayor Finkeldine?
Aye.
Mayor Nanda, aye. That makes it 4-1 with Commissioner Shipley voting against, and it passes. All right, so general public comments will be accepted in written form only. General public comments must be submitted 24 hours prior to the start of the meeting. Emails or mail are acceptable, and written comments can also be dropped in the utility billing drop box located at the cutout at 6th Street in New Hampshire. All comments should be marked for the City Commission. To submit general public comment by email, you may email the email address included, or by mail, City Hall, 6th Street, Lawrence, Kansas 66044. The email is ccagendas@lawrenceks.org. We received 3 items on public comment, one from Ty Edwards regarding the Chief of Police, one from Chris Flowers regarding the Chief of Police, and one from Sherry Ellenbecker regarding our COVID-19 response. Again, we won't be reading those in full, but those can be accessed on the agenda. We are now ready to move on to regular agenda item number 1, receive 2020 Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Funding Recommendations, and hold a public hearing.
This is Danelle Walters with the Community Development Division. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We're here tonight to share the CDBG and Home 2020 allocations and action plan with you. This is for the 2020 program year, which runs from August of 2020 to July of 2021. And per our citizen participation plan, the city will conduct at least 2 public hearings per year to obtain citizen views and comments and to respond to the proposals and questions. Such meetings will be conducted at a minimum of 2 different times during the program year, and together they'll cover the following topics: housing and community development needs, development of proposed activities, proposed strategies and actions for affirmatively furthering fair housing, and review of program performance. So these hearings are held to obtain the views of residents of the community on housing and community development needs, including priority non-housing community development and affirmatively furthering fair housing. This public hearing covers the 2020 Annual Action Plan and 2020 Investment Summary. The second public hearing will be held with the Affordable Housing Advisory Board during the fall to look at the results of the 2019 program year and the consolidated planning process for the 2021 program year.
This is Mayor Nanda. Is anybody else presenting?
Well, I was going to let Porter know that he could turn on the PowerPoint. And you can go ahead and advance to slide 2.
Hang on just a second. Too many screens.
You know, Goldie's here, so I get it.
Okay, hang on, sorry. Okay.
So for the citizen participation timeline, the recommendations were published in the Lawrence Journal World on May 18th, and a press release was sent out through the city. And also, we did directly email all the applicants. So with this, we do have a public comment period that's open for 30 days from May 18th to June 17th. And you can go to the next slide. So for the recommendation process, the procedures were just created last year as we did dissolve the Community Development Advisory Committee. So we did outline some new procedures, and they were created to outline the methodology of the funding allocation recommendations for the city. The document went into effect beginning with this current program year that we're presenting tonight. And it should be noted that we did have some time frames set out on that procedure, and the COVID-19 response did create some deviations from that usual calendar, but we're definitely thinking that this was obviously an outlier, hopefully, and that we should be able to be back on track with holding the public hearing at the end of April and subsequent meetings after that. So the process did include some automatic allocations this year for the CDBG program administration, which was 20% of the base CDBG allocation, and I will go through those here for you too. And then also 10% of the base allocation for the home grant. There's some additional grant requirements that I'll speak to a little bit later in the presentation as we go over those particular programs. The home funding was recommended by the Affordable Housing Advisory Board at their March meeting, and city staff, there's a staff review committee that looked at the CDBG public service allocation applications, and then we had several meetings through the month of May to look at the recommendations for those. And with both CDBG and home this year, one thing that was a lot different from years past is that we did utilize a funding application matrix. So the applications were scored this year. You can go to the next slide. So we'll dive into the home program first. So the base grant for the home program for 2020 was $446,291. And added to that, we do have anticipated program income in the amount of $25,000. Program income comes back into the city from our loan programs, which we receive payments on, and then also loans that pay off. So we do get amounts that come back into the program that we can reinvest into the community. The total amount that we had to work with was $471,291. As I mentioned, there was the home administration line item, which was automatically applied, and that was $44,629. The home applications were submitted to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee at the end of February for their review, and they discussed it at their March meeting and then made funding recommendations from there. And I will note that the chair of the AHAB, Ron Gacius, is in attendance, so if you have questions about the process for allocating the home funds, he's here to answer any questions that you would have. Next slide. Okay, this slide does speak to the applications themselves and the recommendations for the home grant. Two items of note that I kind of mentioned earlier that there's some other caps that I would talk about. There's a minimum of 15% of the base grant amount that must be located to the city's Community Housing Development Organization, or as they're called, CHODOs. Currently, we have one CHODO in Lawrence, and that's tenants to homeowners. The other item is that the home grant may be allocated a maximum of 5% to the CHODO for operations, which just helps the day-to-day goings on of the agency in delivering home and home eligible activities. The projects that received recommended allocations include a partnership with the city and tenants to homeowners for the first-time homebuyer assistance program. That includes down payment assistance and both project and closing cost subsidies for income-eligible first-time homebuyers. The second one is the Lawrence Habitat for Humanity Foundation for One Home. They are getting money for their 105th home in the community. The Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority received funding recommendation for tenant-based rental assistance. So that is very similar to the New Horizons voucher program that the city and county have been funding in the past for them. It's got a focus on moving homeless households into housing, and under this, it's a 24-month program, and then there is also a case management component that comes with it. The last two are the ones I alluded to at the beginning of the slide, which are the CHODO activities. So the 15% minimum that's required to go to the CHODO is known as CHODO project funds. This funding allows a CHODO to either develop, sponsor, or manage affordable housing. Tenants to homeowner typically develops housing with this. That's how they've used that money in the past. And then the AHAB did go ahead and recommend the 5% for CHODO operating funds, even though it is optional. Next slide. For the next slide, we put together a kind of a graph that just shows the past allocation recommendations. I don't really have any additional information to say about this slide. It's just in there for informational purposes. Go to the next slide. So then we'll hop over to CDBG. The base CDBG grant for 2020 was $758,473. Added to that is our anticipated program income of $50,000, and then we had reallocation of $250,000. The reallocation comes from either years where we took in way more program income than we estimated, or some projects came in under budget, some of them got canceled. That's kind of how that money tends to compound. So we have that we were able to use this year. The program income and the reallocation can only be used for non-administration and non-public service activities. So per the procedures document, the CDBG administration and the city programs allocations are automatically figured. Administration is figured at 20% of the base grant, and the city programs are funded at about 75% of what we refer to as the rest of the funds, which would be all the funds that do not include administration or public services. The remaining 25% of kind of that rest of the fund amount is available on a competitive basis for agencies, for neighborhoods, for infrastructure projects, that type of thing. Next slide. These are the automatic allocation amounts for administration, and then also for city programs. In that, you'll see that we have the comprehensive housing rehabilitation program, the emergency and furnace loan program, and then weatherization. Also, it includes program delivery of not only these programs, but all programs with CDBG and home. We're also responsible for doing environmental reviews and other work as a participating jurisdiction for other HUD-funded projects in the community. Staff reached out to several city departments that would have potentially projects that could fall under CDBG eligibility. And the one that we got back that was submitted was the mill and overlay request from MSO. So we were able to put $425,000 towards that. And all city programs must continue to meet the CDBG national objective and income requirements. So they all have to still give a low to moderate income benefit. Next slide. We should be on one that says that it has non-public service recommendations. I'm not sure if.
There it is. Is that right?
Nope, I think it's two more from that. Oh, no, I'm sorry, go one back. And then I think
Two.
I'm on slide 9. Sorry, Porter. There we go. The one that I have in front of me is the non-public service recommendation, and it has a table that shows Independence Inc. and Good Life Innovations. For the 25% of the funds that were available for non-public service competitive grants, the 2 applications received were awarded full funding because there was adequate funding available for them. Independence Inc. has proposed to continue their accessible housing program, which assists renters and homeowners with accessibility modifications in their homes. And then the other application was for Good Life Innovations, which was formerly known as Community Living Opportunities. They have requested to replace the HVAC systems in their group homes in Lawrence. Slide 10. So for the public service applications, these are always a very, very difficult conversation, no matter who is doing the allocation decisions for this. This year, the staff team reviewed the applications from the lens of a scoring matrix, as we mentioned, that assist with the conversation. Since there was no longer a group discussing the recommendations in a public meeting, staff suggested having this public hearing at the City Commission level, so each applicant that wanted to speak to the applications or recommendations had a direct line to the decision-making body. This year presented the added consideration of the COVID-19 response, and staff have been working closely within the unified command structure on filtering projects for disaster response. And while none of this funding was directly related to the CARES Act, HUD has given cities the ability to exceed their public service cap if a project can be tied to COVID-19 response. Next slide. So based on the scoring matrix for the applications, the public service applications are very much divided into 2 sections. You have the agency applications and then the neighborhood association applications. We use the same scoring matrix for both. It is a very hard comparison for apples to apples, but this was the way that we went about it, and this is how we worked with it. So based on the scoring matrix for the applications that serve the vulnerable populations with direct client assistance or case management all scored above the applications that were for neighborhood association operations. Staff noted this difference, but still recognized the important function that neighborhood association communications serve in the community. Because of this, the staff review group recommended funding for the neighborhoods based on a formula for points received and the amount of direct communications, such as a newsletter, that they were requesting. Based on the scoring matrix, group discussion, and analysis of the current impacts of the pandemic on the community, staff is recommending fully funding the agencies that are providing direct assistance in the forms of financial, supportive services, case management, and counseling. These projects all had a goal of keeping people housed in some fashion. In taking into consideration the COVID-19 public service cap waiver, staff is proposing to HUD to exceed the cap by $11,000 based on the applicability of the LCS project to the pandemic response for case management and stabilization services. With the COVID-related work being done at LCS, it is probable that the stabilization services will have a component that ties directly to the pandemic response. The other applications that we had were, as you can see, there's 4 for neighborhood association operating expenses for Brook Creek, East Lawrence, Pinckney, and Schwegler. There is Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas, and that is for the Emergency Assistance Center. Housing and Credit Counseling for credit counseling. Lawrence Community Shelter for stabilization services for shelter guests. The Salvation Army for Emergency Services Council. And then Success by 6 for Housing Assistance Fund, which is keeping infants and toddlers housed. Next slide. This is just a kind of a recap slide that shows past CDBG public service allocations. And then we get to the next steps. So next step would be for the public hearing tonight. We will continue to gather written public comment until June 17th. If tonight you decide that you would like to see some changes in the allocation recommendations, please let us know how you would like that to look. We really don't have movement room in the public services area. If HUD decides that that is not a good enough reason for the COVID-19 waiver to be applied, then we will have to reduce LCS's allocation by that much. So we really have to work kind of within the public service area that we have to work with. So I can stand for any questions you might have.
Ms. Mayor Nanda, thank you, Danielle. Any commissioners have a question?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Larson. I did have a question, Mayor.
Please.
Danielle, could you give me a little bit more explanation or just clarify when the allocation for the neighborhoods is? Can you explain why that amount dropped so much this year?
It dropped because, sorry, this is Danielle Walters. It dropped, really because we used the scoring matrix. And the scoring matrix, there was a definite gap between the agency allocations and the neighborhood allocations. If we went, in all honesty, if we went solely by that score sheet, they wouldn't have been funded. But as I mentioned, we had talked about the importance of the neighborhood communications piece in our staff review, and I don't think that any of us were okay with not funding the neighborhoods. So, we tried to suggest something that would allow for them to, continue some communications with the neighborhood association. I think that if you kind of look at the timeline or the historic CDBG allocations, you'll see that for several years, they got the exact same amount. And I don't mean funded the same every year, but each neighborhood was funded the same amount. I think that when the CDAC was looking at these, that they divided that public service pot up into two separate sections. They looked at neighborhoods and they looked at public services. With a scoring matrix, since we started this procedure this year, the only way to know if the procedure works is to go with the scoring matrix and see how it came out, and this is how it came out.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Commissioner Larson here, I just had one more question. You indicated that it's capped at 15% of the base CDBG grant allocation for the public service applications. Is that a federal requirement, or is that something that it's a federal requirement, 15%?
Yeah, this is Danielle Walters. Yes, it is. It's a federal requirement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Nanda, any other questions from commissioners before we go to public comment?
Mayor, Courtney Shipley, Commissioner Shipley. I want to kind of ask maybe a little more specifically about this matrix. So now this falls into staff purview, right? We have a combined score and an average score. Of course, I don't want to know who did the scoring necessarily, but I wonder if it would help the public to know what the individual scores were that made the combined and average score. Is that available to them? If we want to give feedback to the future, it seems like some of that information might be helpful to us.
Yeah, we can give the scores without names to them. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that I don't have it at this moment, but.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldye. So under your timeline, we would advise requested changes tonight, but then you'd come back to us for another vote?
Yeah, this is Danielle Walters. Yes, it will come back to you. This is just the public hearing this evening, and it will come back to you for final adoption on the 16th.
The This is Vice Mayor Finkeldike again. To the extent we wanted to make a change within that public services, as you said, we'd have to take something away from somebody else and put the, move it to somebody. And I guess I just wanted to be sure that if we took it away from somebody, there would be a chance for them to come back and talk to us.
This is Danelle Walters. Yes, there would be. It would still be open. If you decided to do that tonight, it's still open for another 2 weeks for public comment. And there would be a chance for them to not only make written comment in that time, but they would be able to come talk to you on the 16th as well.
As Commissioner Boley, I'd like to follow up on those questions from the Vice Mayor. As I understand it, our decision date is June 16th, which precedes the end of the comment period. Is there some magic to the 16th?
This is Danelle Walters. It was the last meeting of the month. That was the only magic.
Is it urgent that we do this in June?
Yes, just because our due date to HUD is in the middle of June.
And the requirement for the comment period is that it's 30 days?
30 days, yes.
Okay. So I think probably people ought to know that you better comment before the 16th because that's when we're making our decision.
Commissioner Larson, I had a question to follow up to Commissioner Shipley's question about the matrix. Were the applicants provided with the matrix and how it was going to be scored? Were they provided with all that information ahead of time?
This is Danelle Walters. Yes, they were. We had mandatory applicant meetings before the applications were due to us, and we went through everything and talked about the scoring matrix specifically. They were provided a copy of it with the application.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor and Nanda, y'all had great questions. I appreciate it. Any others before we have our public comment on this item? I guess that we need to open the public hearing.
Commissioner Larson, I move to open the public hearing.
Vice Mayor Finkeldike, second.
Mayor Nanda, we have a motion from Commissioner Larson, a second from Vice Mayor Finkeldike. Commissioner Larson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Finkeldike?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Boley?
Aye.
Mayor Nanda, aye. That passes unanimously. The public hearing is officially open. We do have one individual who signed up to give public comment on this item. Bart Litterzon, please go ahead. You might be on mute. We still can't hear. Okay, we can work this out. Porter, is it possible that you have muted Bart? I know that's been an issue in some meeting.
Sorry. No, Bart is unmuted here.
Is it possible for him to call in and be placed on a speaker?
Yes.
Okay. Can you either press
I'll send him a chat.
Okay, thank you. I mean, he lives a block away. You could just run down here and hop on my screen. Thanks for your patience, everyone. I know technology can be unwieldy. I think we've done a really good job of making this happen so far. So,
Hi, Bart.
Hello.
You were on speaker.
Okay. Awesome. We got it to work. Thank you. This is Bart Littlejohn with the Pinckney Neighborhood Association, and I'm glad that I appreciate the opportunity to go ahead and talk to you all today. I just want to let you know that we've always appreciated the allocations distributed to us through the City of Lawrence. It helps us a great deal as we depend upon them heavily for funding throughout the year for our neighborhood association. And I know, given Danielle's presentation, how tight the funds are, and there is a real, there's a tight wiggle room on it. But we would appreciate any sort of additional funding that you could send our way. As I repeat, we depend heavily upon that funding for the year. It primarily goes to our newsletters and communication and postcards and distributing information to all of our residences. We are a low to moderate income neighborhood, so not everybody has access to the internet. So that entails newsletters and postcards through the mail. So that costs quite a bit of money. So that's where most of that money goes, and I would appreciate it if we can still maintain the same reach that we did before. I know that everything was scored on the matrix this year, and I appreciate that. I understand the fairness of that, but and given what Danielle said, I did hear and understand that both the agencies and the neighborhoods were on the same matrix, and I would hope in the future that could be looked at, because I think that the agencies themselves have the ability to fundraise a little bit, or access to fundraising a little bit more than neighborhoods do, or a different access, so that hopefully the matrix could be specialized for either side, and it's basically two buckets that the money would be going to. So, but in summation, I just wanted to go ahead and let you guys know that I'm here, and that if you have any questions of me, you can go ahead and ask them, and I will try to give you the best answers I can.
Mayor Nanda, thank you, Bart. Porter, is there anyone there present to give public comment on this specific item?
No, Mayor. Not on
Okay.
this item.
We will bring it back up to the commission then. Any thoughts from commissioners?
Commissioner Larson here. I'll go ahead and say a few things. So, when I reviewed this material, I asked the questions that I was really concerned about, is how what the matrix, what the details of the matrix were, and if the neighborhoods knew about that in advance, or any of the applicants knew about that in advance, and then also the cap of 15%, whether that was something we developed or if it was basically a federal requirement. And so those were answered in a manner that seemed reasonable. It is concerning that we are taking a big dip in the amount that we're funding to the neighborhoods, but I also understand that this matrix system is important going forward, that we look at these with that type of an eye. And I also appreciate Bart's comments about possibly looking at the future ways to deal with these metrics or matrix systems, so that it's more of what he would think is more of an apples to apples comparison. But based on the answers I received tonight from staff, I don't see any changes right now that I would want to implement during this round of funding. But I think there's things we can talk about for future ways that we're looking at this.
Mayor Nanda, thank you, Lisa. Commissioner Shipley?
I would echo that a little bit. When I think about other matrices that we have put into place, when I think about transient gas tax or the non-pedestrian priority list, it's important to remember that we do need to go back and look at how how the results played out and whether we think they're being weighed that way. So that's kind of the crux of my question, is to make sure that we revisit that. It's their first year. Also to remember that we do have the ability to do that. If I understand correctly, we have to come up with a 5-year plan, but there's not a whole lot of direction on what that 5-year plan looks like. So certainly we can make adjustments, and I just want to keep track of that and see if it's doing what our priorities are and keeps tracking with what our community priorities are.
Thank you, Commissioner Shipley. Commissioner Bully?
Commissioner Bully, I have a question for you. A point of order type thing. Are we still in the public hearing?
Yes.
Do we need to close the public hearing and then have this conversation?
I believe it's open until next meeting or the end of June. Is that Sherry?
No, there's a second hearing, correct, Danelle? This is the first of 2 hearings.
This is Danelle. Actually, the public hearing would just be for this evening, and then the public comment period is open until the 17th, and then it comes back to you for adoption, potential to consider adoption on the 16th.
Thank you, Danelle. Thank you, Commissioner Bully. I appreciate that. Have that motion.
Commissioner Bully moved to close the public hearing.
Vice Mayor Finkeldine, second.
This is Mayor Nanda. We had a motion from Commissioner Bully, a second from Vice Mayor Finkeldine. Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Finkeldine?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Mayor Nanda, aye. Passes unanimously. We have closed that public hearing. Thank you again to Commissioner Bully for pulling us back into order here. Other comments from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Bully.
I have a question, please. This is Commissioner Bully. How many neighborhoods qualify for funding but did not make a request?
This is Danelle Walters. I'm going to turn that over to Brad Carr to answer, because I always get this one off by a couple.
Hi, this is Brad Carr, Community Development. What we go off of is actual registered neighborhood associations. And so of those, there are 25 that qualify currently as low and moderate income. And so of those 25 registered neighborhood associations, 4 of them applied for funding.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Dan. This is Commissioner Bully again. I guess my concern is that if we're hoping to fund communications for neighborhood associations, we're failing the vast majority of that. And I don't see where the money's going to come from in this for us to do that for 25 neighborhoods. Thank you.
This is Mayor Nanda. I think that Stuart brings up good points, and I think that Commissioner Shipley and Commissioner Larson as well, that this is the first year we're doing it, and we're seeing maybe some gaps. We also have to see a process through. Commissioner Bully brings up a good point about eligibility and getting that information out, and if we are successful in doing so, this is going to be an even trickier conversation around the neighborhood associations. And so how do we need to address that? As far as action on this item, Sherry, are we needing anything for you all from us? Or is the dialogue that we've had sufficient on this item?
This is Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk. We don't need an official action to receive the recommendations. Danelle, do you have anything that you're wanting from the commission in terms of an action?
This is Danelle Walters. No, this is what we needed for this evening. If I could also maybe say that I think that the staff review team is in agreement that perhaps maybe that matrix needs to be looked at. I would say that it was challenging as we were going through the applications. So we are 100% open to reevaluating this as we go along.
Thanks, Mayor Nanda. Thank you, Danelle. Is there anything else from commissioners before we move on to the next piece of things tonight?
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldye. Anytime you have a new process, typically there's winners and losers in the way that works. And in this case, the neighborhood associations have taken a pretty big hit. And when you look back at looking back at the chart that shows, the past funding, both the Salvation Army and Success by Six are both seeing very large increases, very worthy projects, projects I'm very familiar with. I do think if we were looking, those would probably be the two we'd look to take something from in order to give to the neighborhood associations. They are taking a pretty big hit in 1 year, but again, I just point that out.
Mayor Nanda.
This is Commissioner Boley, if I may. I'd just like to express my appreciation for the work that's been done by Affordable Housing Advisory Board and also staff in working through these issues and going through this new process. So thank you so much for what you've done for us.
Thanks. Okay, if there's nothing else, this is Mayor Nanda again. I have had a request that we take a 5-minute recess before we move on to item number 2. So we will go ahead and do that, and we will be back in 5 minutes.
in-person. Note, for safety, in-person comments will be reserved for those if you're providing it in person.
So I'll let the mayor know that.
Yeah, and again, in another section.
Are back. Vice Mayor Nikolai?
Here.
Commissioner Larson?
Here.
Commissioner Bully?
Here.
Commissioner Shipley? Here. All right, we are all present and accounted for. We will be now moving on to item number 2 on our agenda. Consider approving an institutional development plan, SUP 2066, for the detention facilities for use for Douglas County Jail located at 3601 East 25th Street. What do we have on this item?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Becky Pepper. I'm a planner with the Planning and Development Services Department. Now, this request for you tonight consists of an expansion of an existing land use on the property located at 3601 East 25th Street, which contains the Douglas County Jail. The expansion would entail the construction of an approximate 13,000 square foot building addition that would be located on the southeast side of the existing building, as well as the addition of 38 new parking spaces that would be located in the southeast parking area. The subject property is zoned GPI, which is the General Public and Institutional Use Zoning District. And so because of the property's zoning, the process for development includes the approval of an institutional development plan. And the review criteria for institutional development plan looks at the proposed development and the land use in terms of its compatibility with the surrounding land uses, its consistency with the character of the area, and its impact on the surrounding properties and the natural environment. The findings of fact are provided in the staff report, which has been included in your packet, and those findings showed that the proposed institutional development plan complies with the city codes as they relate to the proposed land use, and the expansion would not adversely impact the surrounding uses, the surrounding properties, or the natural environment. The existing land use, which is classified as a detention facilities use in the city's land development code, has existed on the property since 1997, and a future building addition similar in size and location was planned for at that time. In addition, a future expansion was later discussed in 2008 with adoption of the Southeast Area Plan. Now, that plan specifically notes that the site was developed with the future expansion in mind, and the plan recommends that the property remain as a public facility land use. The Planning Commission considered this institutional development plan application at their April 26th meeting and voted unanimously to forward the item to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval. Prior to this, to tonight's meeting, the Commission did request some supplemental information from the applicant regarding the operating and maintenance costs of the expansion. The applicant's response has been provided for you in a staff memo included in your packet. And that's all I have for you tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and also the applicant is here tonight if you have specific questions for them. Thank you.
Ms. Mayor Nanda, thank you, Becky. Are there any questions from commissioners?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Larson. I guess I have questions for both, actually for the applicant, I guess. So I'm not for sure how I should proceed here, Mayor. Should I wait for them to comment?
Were they, are they planning to make a presentation, or are they just here for questions?
Oh, I didn't, I thought maybe this is Commissioner Larson. I thought they were going to do a presentation, but maybe not.
Just Mayor Nanda, I didn't believe that they were here for a presentation, but to answer any questions that we might have. If I'm incorrect, will someone correct me, please? Okay, Commissioner Larson, I would say go ahead and ask the questions that you have. Thank you.
Okay, I submitted 3 questions to staff to try to get some information from the applicant regarding the funding mechanism. As you know, when we review this from from the staff report, there were 7 key items that we were to look at, and one of those was regarding the ability to fund the maintenance on this project, on this expansion. So my question, and I didn't see any response from the applicant on this. However, they did respond to me when I asked questions, when I submitted questions to staff about it. And they did provide a response to it, but my question is to staff on the response that the county provided. One of the things that they pointed out there was they didn't believe that the item that I was questioning, which was item number 5 of the criteria, was really relevant to this situation tonight. And I just wanted to get staff's opinion. Is that the case? Is that true?
Amy Miller, PDS staff, and that for the review of institutional development plans, it falls on the special use permit criteria listed in the code. And that same criteria is what is outlined in the staff report, and number 5 regarding funding is included, and it is a code requirement.
It is a code requirement. So it is relevant as far as our decision-making process as we review this. Is that my understanding?
Amy Miller, PDS staff, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Lisa Larson, Commissioner. Sorry about that. I didn't think I said my name. So so that was the main question I had for staff, and hopefully I will get an opportunity to ask questions from the applicant also at this time. That further down the road.
This is Sarah Plinsky, County Administrator. I believe in the statement that we provided, we indicated that the maintenance costs for the facility, since it's going to be largely a significant upgrade of the existing HVAC systems, will be minimal moving forward, and I believe we provided that answer in our response. But I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that I can.
This is Commissioner Larson. Thank you, Sarah, for providing that information. And yes, you did. I agree with you that you did indicated that the costs you believe were going to be minimal. But I would appreciate any details you can give us as to what the plan is for maintenance as far as the costs and what you think, what you estimate those to be going forward.
Well, this is Sarah Plinsky again with Douglas County. I would also point out that it takes a significant period of time to build a jail. So we anticipate that we will continue to refine those cost estimates as we get closer to when the jail will actually come online, which we anticipate at the earliest will probably be 2022. And as the City Commission knows, we're all very deep involved in the development of the 2021 budget. So our estimates are very preliminary at this point, and but we have current estimates that we're working on to refine, but those will change as we bring the systems online and are able to exactly determine what those exact costs will be. But it's a very so I guess, are you asking specifically for a line item of the maintenance costs projected?
Yeah, Commissioner Larson. Yeah, I'm curious as to what those costs are going to be. And the main reason I'm asking is I just believe it's important that we provide as much information, not only to this commission, but also to our community members and the taxpayers as to what the cost of this, ongoing cost of this project is going to be, the maintenance specifically.
This is Sarah Plinsky again with the county. We have provided to the public some estimations in 2020 dollars, what we think the total operating costs of the facility will be. And we believe the total operating, including staffing costs, are $6 million, roughly $6 million. But as I said, there's a lot of work yet to be done on those numbers, and I envision that the County Commission, through the series of next several operating budgets, will further refine those in that process.
Okay, great. Commissioner Larson, I appreciate that, Sarah, very much. So the $6 million, how is that going to require us to raise the mill levy in order to meet those funding requirements?
This is Sarah Plinsky with Douglas County. I would say, as a good administrator, that is a decision of the Board of County Commissioners to make as they evaluate the operating budget, and I dare not speak for them as a good administrator in that role. So, and obviously this commission cannot necessarily commit future commissions as to how they would like to approach it. However, the Board of County Commissioners has discussed both reducing their budget and took a number of reductions in the 2019 budget to make room to operate this facility, and have also discussed that if possible, or if needed, they will potentially raise taxes, property taxes, to support the needed expansion.
Okay.
So I can't, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Commissioner Larson, I appreciate that, that honesty, because I understand your position. I appreciate that. So, and also thank you for the information regarding what you're estimating, or what the information you provided, the $6 million annually that may be required to operate this or run the expansion. Thank you, Sarah.
This is Mayor Nanda. Are there questions from other commissioners? Commissioner Shipley?
Mayor, maybe, I'm sorry, this might be more for Amy. I'm trying to think back to some other SUPs that we've seen come forward, and I wonder if maybe some of the differences are because it's the IDP here. But like this number 5 question about where the funding's coming from, I don't remember that being asked of other SUPs we've looked at. So is that a difference with this being an IDP?
Amy Miller, PDS staff. That question is asked of all special use permits and is included in the staff report and analysis for all of those applications.
Okay, so when I think back, sorry, Commissioner Shipley, I apologize, Mayor, excuse me, sorry, Amy. When I think back, for example, the DARE Center, the DARE Drop-In Center downtown, I don't remember that particularly being a matter of discussion, being sure that a nonprofit organization be able to provide payment or keep it for 3 years. In that instance, I think the commission decided, I was not on the commission at that time, to check the SUP again in 3 years. Which brings me to qualifications. Is this like any other SUP where there could be qualifications of some kind that we could address it with?
Amy Miller, PDS staff. So that analysis, that question and the subsequent analysis is included in every special use permit staff report. I can't speak to whether it was a specific discussion item during the meeting and the hearing for the DARE Center. The language is probably somewhat similar in terms of the staff analysis. Since it is a special use permit, there are a number of different conditions that you may consider.
This is Mayor Nanda. Because of this issue, we will need to declare our ex parte communications. I have had a direct conversation with Patrick Kelly in regard to this issue, and I would say, aside from a conversation with him and more voicemails than my inbox could handle, and more emails than I could get through, unfortunately, single momming today. There were no conversations that I engaged in regard to this, aside from that one Zoom meeting with Patrick Kelly and an invitation to Justice Matters. But again, there was nothing discussed in either of those meetings, and that conversation with Justice Matters was several years ago, so it wasn't in regard to the SUP specifically. There was nothing discussed that has not been brought up in this meeting. Other commissioners?
Commissioner Larson here. The conversations I have had have been limited to Patrick Kelly, and just in regards to the funding mechanisms, which were my questions, and I've had a couple of conversations with him about that. And like you, Mayor, I've received numerous emails as well as phone calls, but none of those, they've all been specific towards the jail. And my response back on the emails is just, my focus on this was going to be on item number 5, and that I would continue to ask questions about it and hopefully get some more detailed answers from the applicant. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Bowley. I've received voluminous communications, emails, and phone calls. I've listened to the messages. I haven't engaged in conversations. I think all the information I've seen is in the public record.
Commissioner Shipley, I also, especially this afternoon, received lots of emails and messages. I wasn't able to engage with most of those people, well, really any of those people, but I will save the messages for the public record or legal record if that's necessary. I did speak with Patrick Wilbur, Patrick Kelly, Nancy Thelman, and Paul DeGeorge in person on this issue. And I believe all of the other correspondence is included in our packet. Although I will say I've heard my email dinging since we've been in this meeting, so there may be more that I have not seen.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldye. Just the phone calls and emails that everyone received this afternoon.
Mayor Nanda, thank you for disclosing those. I had a couple of questions. One thing that I wanted to ask about was what is the impact feasibility recommendation around waiting until litigation on this issue has concluded to make this decision? Is this a timeliness issue? What are the consequences if that were to occur?
I'm not clear if that's a question for the applicant or of staff.
Whoever has the answer. I'm not sure who would have the clearest idea of what that would look like, and perhaps there are two different perspectives from staff and from the applicant. If both of you have thoughts to share.
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. We don't typically take those into account unless the city's involved. If it's involving other parties, we go ahead and operate and run our city code as is. We don't usually take that into account.
Fair enough. Thank you, Randy. I don't know if Sarah wants to speak to that. You're not obligated.
Yeah, this is Sarah Plinsky. We would like to proceed with the application as submitted.
Thank you. What then would be the other question that I have is what would be the impact if this SUP was not approved? And I guess that's probably a staff question.
This is Amy Miller, PDS staff. I'll take the first part, and I'm not sure if Randy will need to add something to it, but then there wouldn't be the land use approvals under the zoning code to allow the project to move forward.
Thank you. I don't know if Randy
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. Yes, if there were not enough votes to approve the SUP and the institutional development plan, then the project would not be allowed to go forward under the city code.
Okay. Mayor, and I have one more quick question. I see that Commissioner Shipley also has a question. I want to make sure that we make clear the process and the standards on which we need to make a decision on this issue, which is whether the development plan complies with the provision of the development code, the land development code, and then whether it's compatible with adjacent uses in terms of scale, site design, operating characteristics, hours of operation, etc. Whether it causes substantial diminution in the value of the property, whether public safety, transportation, and utility facilities and services will be available, whether the development plan provides adequate assurance of continuing maintenance, will cause significant adverse impacts to the natural environment, and whether it's appropriate to place a time limit on the period, of time the use is to be allowed. And those are the question that I have in going through that. Those are the limiting factors by which we may make this decision. Is that correct?
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. The golden factors are also applicable, and so there may be other factors that aren't even listed there or within the city code that may be considered and might be relevant to this particular situation. I'm not aware of any off the top of my head, but there may be other factors out there that could be considered.
Ms. Mayor Nanda, thank you. Commissioner Shipley?
Yeah, so again, thinking back to other SUPs, putting on restrictions or things like that, would there be a possibility of only allowing it in the case that the county was able to be successful with its case? That's probably for Randy.
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. I really don't know that we could condition it that way, to be honest with you.
Ms. Mayor Nanda, are there any other questions for staff or the applicant at this point? Okay, we did have 2 individuals signed up to give public comment this evening. The first is Patrick Wilbur. Please go ahead, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Patrick Wilbur. I live at 521 Durham Court. And you guys have covered a lot of my concerns already. On criterion 5, I think if the criterion is on there, that we should take it seriously and have something a little more detailed in terms of assurances of not only maintenance but operations at a jail expansion. This is a very large, long-term project, and we're in an economic period right now where we're probably going to have a pretty significant downturn. So the prospect of raising property taxes, which will be necessary to maintain operations and maintenance, is probably not feasible for the next few years. So I think that is an important criterion you guys should look at. In regard to whether it's been looked at in the past, if it's part of the requirements, then I think it's something we should use. Otherwise, we should probably get rid of that as part of the SUP process. Regarding the litigation, this is a case that could go on for years before it's decided. There's a variety of outcomes. There may be another election. The project itself could change in that time. We may be looking at a ballot question in a couple of years where the project looks much different. So I guess my concern is we should just go ahead and wait on approving anything until we're sure there's a project there that is going forward, and make the decision at that time. And I apologize for I lost video at my end, but I'm glad you got my audio, so thank you.
Mayor Nanda, thank you, Mr. Wilbur. The other person we have for public comment this evening is Chris Flowers. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers. I sent in a correspondence, I guess, for this, and I think this is something I'd like to see the new Director of Equity get to weigh in on this subject, because the jail, I mean, we know that there's more minorities locked up than there are other people. So if it's, I would say the jail's probably one of the biggest sources of inequity. And you started out this meeting talking about holding other white people accountable. So I think the Director of Equity should get to weigh in on this subject. And also, there's a concern that if they expand it, they're just going to start locking up more people. And if they're already locking up minorities at a higher rate, that's just going to expand that problem. So I think the Director of Equity should at least get to weigh in on the decision. And also, I agree with the part what's been talked about, like the funding. Like, what if they can't fund it? Then it just seems kind of fishy. And I don't think the county's been actually trying to find alternatives to the jail, because I've gone to some of their meetings, and some of them, they just last like 15 to 30 minutes. I mean, that's not uncommon there. And you guys go on for hours. And they could be talking about alternatives. And I don't think they're actually trying as hard as they can. But do what you guys got to do. Thank you.
Miranda, thank you. Public comment. We will now bring this back up. I'm sorry, Porter, are there any individuals there to give public comment in person?
Yes, Mayor, there are 3 people here that want to provide public comment.
Okay, can we have them come in one at a time?
Who wants to go first? Okay. Just use the podium.
And you do not need to sign in, just please state your name and then I'll start the clock.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. My name's Iris Cliff, and do we just start the clock now?
I'm doing it on here because that's broken.
Oh.
So just try to make sure you look, the camera is right there.
Oh, okay, cool. I can't wear my glasses right now.
That's okay, you can speak that direction and just speak as loud as you can.
Okay, all right. So I just, like most of the community members today, just became aware that the city commission was meeting about the jail expansion. And I just don't appreciate, which I'm sure a lot of people don't appreciate, that this hasn't been clear to the community that we are moving forward to expand the jail. And there was already a public vote where a lot of people said they were opposed to expanding the jail. And I just don't understand why we're having this meeting and why a lot of the community members were confused about it, along with there's funding questions. There's just a lot of everything's just not clear about this issue. And obviously there's a lot of different ways we can use the funding to help with mental services, providing other services to aid people to keep them out of the jail. And that's all I want to say right now. Thank you.
Would you mind saying your name again?
Yeah, my name's Iris Cliff.
Thank you.
You, Iris.
Yeah.
I know. This is a strange circumstance, for sure. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to have you, so you'll need to state your name.
Okay.
And kind of speak to this. You don't have to stand here. You
Okay.
can stand here. You're speaking to that device more than anything.
Hi, my name is Miranda Pratt, and I also, like Iris, didn't hear about this issue that was going to be discussed tonight until this afternoon. And I don't think that it is okay to not be transparent about it with your constituents, considering Black and brown people get locked up at higher rates, and we should be focusing on mental health initiatives rather than jail expansion, especially right now with the Black Lives Matter protests and the murder of George Floyd. So thank you.
Thank you.
Basically in order.
Okay.
Just state your name and you can speak. Actually, you're sort of speaking to this device. You can stand here. That's great.
All right, thank you. Hi, my name is Shannon Reed, and I live in the Prairie Park neighborhood. Please use this moment, commissioners, to stand with the growing majority of your constituents who told Douglas County commissioners in a fair election that we do not approve of a bigger jail in our community. At minimum, all of our elected officials should halt any further development and funding of this project immediately, so long as the county is actively being sued in court for proceeding illegally. Please use this moment to stand in solidarity with your community who is pleading for our leaders to halt this project. Use the funds to increase the health and safety of our communities. Listen to the Black and brown voices who are screaming for their lives right now. Please do not approve this funding.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Porter. Is that everyone who is there to give public comment on this issue?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, we will bring that back up to the commission then at this point.
This is Commissioner Lisa Larson, and Mayor, I apologize. I did have one more question. Would it be okay if I asked that of Randy Larkin?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, Randy, I would appreciate if you could provide us some insight as to what the recourse would be if this were denied tonight. What action would be available to the applicant after, if it was?
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. The county would have recourse with the courts if they wanted to. That'd be the next step if they wanted to proceed with this. They could perhaps come back with a different plan. They could decide not to do the project. But anyway, those are their opportunities. If they're unhappy with the decision or agreed by the decision that were to deny it, then they would have the opportunity to flesh that out in court.
Okay. Thank you, Randy.
Please go ahead, Commissioner Shipley.
Commissioner Shipley, Randy, I hate to ask you this similar question again, but I was speaking to someone on staff who kind of pointed out legal staff never says to do something or not to do something. They give us risk assessment. So you have kind of answered a little bit that question, but is there anything more in the way of risk assessment that you could give me about the likelihood that if we came to be in litigation with the county, how much money would we need to spend in order to defend that? Or how likely is it?
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. I would hate to try to forecast what the county would do or would not do. I don't know that the city would want to necessarily be in a lawsuit with the county, but if that was the case, then we would, do what we could. As to the costs, it'd be difficult to say, but it's going to be at least in 5 figures. I don't know how high in 5 figures, but it'd be $10,000, $20,000 to defend the lawsuit, probably for the city to pay. But whenever the city gets sued, we take those seriously, and we, yeah.
This is Commissioner Bowley, if I may. I'd like to address the issue of transparency on the part of this commission. This issue was on our consent agenda a couple of weeks ago, and we deferred it to tonight so it could be heard on the regular agenda and provide the citizens an opportunity to communicate with us on this issue, which they have done.
This is Mayor Ananda. I think that even 2 weeks ago, my conversation around this issue looked significantly different. Having been a defense attorney, having met with clients in a laundry closet, having met with clients in a brig, where sheriff's deputies had to be present in order to have conversations with my clients because they were sent to other jails due to the lack of space in the jail. Having worked primarily with victims of sexual and domestic violence in my career, providing legal representation in civil cases. I think that my conclusions on this issue, because it's not about feelings, it's which facts weigh most heavily at any given moment, have changed. However, on the issue of jail expansion, and that's a direct result of the actions and brutality that we've seen in the last, well, frankly, 400 years, but let's focus on the last week. However, I have to acknowledge that that's not the question we're being asked to answer here tonight, is whether or not we support the jail. That's not the question before us. We're being presented with a land use question for a special use permit in order to allow that plan to move forward regarding land use. And the factors that I read earlier are the factors that we have to consider. Again, I will repeat them, whether they comply with applicable provisions of the Land Development Code, whether the plan is compatible with adjacent uses in terms of scale, site design, operating characteristics, hours of operation, traffic generation, lighting, noise, odor, dust, and other external impacts, whether it will cause a substantial diminution in value of other property in the neighborhood in which it is to be located, whether public safety, transportation, and utility facilities and services will be available to serve the subject property while maintaining sufficient levels of service for existing development, whether the plan provides adequate assurances of continuing maintenance, for the proposed institutional development plan will cause significant adverse impacts on the natural environment, whether it's appropriate to place a time limit on a period of time for the special use permit. And the only item that has been brought forward is in regard to continuing maintenance. And the argument that I see there is doesn't hold the weight that I would necessarily need it to hold in order to say that it would not address that continuing maintenance when you're adding onto a building that has maintenance already versus building a separate building or adding. So I guess, that's probably more information than anybody needed, but I also want to be very clear and the factors that we are looking at here, because those are the factors that are before us. We as a city aren't, aside from the fact that we are in the county, aren't deciding whether or not this occurs, but whether a special use permit is granted.
Commissioner Larson here. Mayor, I echo quite a few of your evaluations of this project. It is narrow. We have a narrow scope that we are required to look at, and you've outlined those very clearly. When I reviewed the whole packet, 6 of those 7 items I could not see where they weren't following the code or following those items. It was that one item, number 5, that I was concerned about, so that's why I asked the questions that I asked. And I was hoping to get some detailed answers tonight regarding the costs, the ongoing costs. And I believe I have from Sarah Polinsky, the county administrator, and I really appreciate Sarah that she providing that information to us. And so it's my understanding that basically the answers to those questions are, the estimation is $6 million a year, and that you are considering, or that the commissioners, that obviously it's the commissioner's decision, but the items that are being looked at is to reduce budgets as well as to raise property taxes, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I hear. Again, Mayor Ananda said it very clearly as to what our scope is, and our feelings about the jail is not part of this decision-making process, but we need to stick with what we are legally required to look at. And I feel like my questions were answered, and I really appreciate that. And so I can't at this point see any reason based on our scope of what we looked at to deny this.
Mayor, can I ask Randy to clarify something he said earlier? Randy, I'm sorry to call on you so many times. Commissioner Shipley. You said maybe I misunderstood you. There are other factors that are not factors that could be considered, but you did not enumerate them. Did I misunderstand you?
No, this is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. Yes, this is a special use permit, and the Kansas courts have stated that the factors enunciated in Golden versus City of Overland Park are also relevant to SUP cases. And those are things like conformance with the comprehensive plan, the zoning and use of nearby properties, the character of the neighborhood, the recommendations of professional staff, the extent to which approving it will detrimentally affect nearby properties. Those are the types of factors that case sets forth. And that case also states that those factors are not exclusive. There may be other factors that may weigh in on a particular land use decision. I don't know that there are any present here, but there could be.
This is Vice Mayor Finkel. I agree with the comments. I think our role here is limited, and we're certainly not, we have cases when I was on the Planning Commission and other times, the question is not the underlying, do we like Costco or do we like Sam's? Do we like, the underlying use? It's a land use in totality, so it's a land use question, not an activity question. And so I do think we're limited in our scope, and certainly it would be unfair to any of the commissioners here if someone took this vote as, the public or anyone took a vote as this was some statement on any one particular's position on the jail. There's lots of comments I received today in email and by phone talking about funding, talking about other uses for funding and all of those things. Again, those are not within our control. That's a county commission decision on how they do that. So I certainly believe we have a staff report that supports it. We have a unanimous vote by the Planning Commission, and I believe it's something I can support. And I'm happy to make a motion if there's no more conversation.
Mayor Nanda, are there any other?
Foley.
Please.
I appreciate Sarah coming and sharing with us today. Essentially what she's told us is the cost of this is going to be $4 million for our property owners. And, the effects on our community, we've heard a lot about that today too. So I want to make sure that people understand that as we vote on this tonight, this is not an endorsement of the jail expansion. We are constrained by our land use code to be able to only look at certain factors. And while I have concerns about the finances, I don't think that I can support opposing this on those bases, just as I can on other concerns. So I think we, pretty much are obliged to provide the special use permit.
Mayor, Commissioner Shipley, while I agree with all of that, that's gonna fall like cold lunch meat in front of any of the people who have tried to get a hold of us today. So the important issues that you referred to at the top of our meeting and the ones we've heard of, over-policing, systematic racism, vulnerable populations, whatever we vote on in the next 20 minutes or half an hour won't really mean anything unless we have those actual discussions somewhere else. So I just hope later, often we come up with commission items at the end of the day. And hopefully the people that are tuning in right now, hoping for us to vote a certain way, will stay tuned later for a discussion about what we're actually going to do in the purview of the city commission, which is about what we do with our local police. We have no control over the county. We have no control over the sheriff. We do have input on what our local police do. And there's some confusion there in some of the correspondence and phone calls that I got, but that is actually where we can make a difference. So whatever happens, I hope those people continue to stay engaged.
So I guess, Commissioner Shipley, this is Mayor Nanda, I really appreciate your comments there, because this is a painful conversation to have in light of the comments that were made at the top of the meeting, because this is not where I want to be, not the decision that I want to be making. You know, I think that this can have an impact in November, the choices that people make when they walk to the voting booth as well. And we can acknowledge that there's potential that this conversation will be moved at that point. So I suppose, unless there's other comment from other commissioners, we are ready for a motion.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldine. I would move for approval of the Institutional Development Plan, SUP 20-066. And adopt here on first reading the ordinance number 9766.
This is Mayor Nanda. Do we need to list the reasons for the approval?
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. I think during your deliberations, those were well stated. I don't believe that you need to go into further detail regarding the reasons for it, just the motion and any vote on that motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Boley, I'll second.
There's a motion from Vice Mayor Finkeldine, a second from Commissioner Boley. Vice Mayor Finkeldine?
Aye.
Commissioner Boley?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Commissioner Shipley?
Nay.
Vice Mayor Ananda, a begrudging aye. So that has passed 4-1 with Commissioner Shipley voting against. We are ready to move on to item 3. Receive presentation from Gould Evans and Downtown Lawrence, Inc. on Downtown Lawrence recommended temporary right-of-way configuration concept allowing expanded business space along Massachusetts Street to aid with businesses reopening during the COVID-19 event.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager, and I'll kick this item off here for the discussion this evening. What has been happening over the past several weeks is, as you know, we have been working with a variety of businesses in order to respond to various aspects of COVID-19, and you all have taken several actions in order to help make the situation more flexible and for us to respond to those business needs at this very unusual time. So a couple short weeks ago, we began discussing with Downtown Lawrence, Inc. Possible reconfiguration in a temporary basis of Massachusetts Street in order to help provide some expanded ability for businesses to operate in the right-of-way in a temporary fashion that will help enhance social distancing. And this evening, we have Sally Zagrai, who's the Executive Director of Downtown Lawrence, and she will speak to the issue, as well as we have Whitney Lang and John Wilkins here with Gould Evans, and they have been working with Downtown Lawrence pro bono on a design of downtown in response to this, and this is what you'll be hearing this evening. At the conclusion of the presentation from Whitney, I'll make a few additional comments about some of the implementation details, and then any of us will be available for any questions that you may have. So first, I'll turn it over to Sally Zagrai.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you, commissioners, for being here and serving through all this time, which has been challenging to say the least. We, Downtown Lawrence, Inc., as I think you all know, is a membership organization of over 200 downtown businesses, most of which are locally owned and operated, and we have been in existence since 1972. Our mission, put simply, is to promote, protect, and preserve downtown Lawrence as the heart of the city, as the retail center, the restaurant, cultural center, the entertainment center, the governmental center, and really our public square. So obviously this year has been incredibly challenging for all of our entire community, our state, our nation, really our entire globe. But here in downtown Lawrence, as in other communities, COVID-19 basically brought our economy to a standstill almost overnight. And most of our businesses had to close their doors without knowing when or if they might open them again. And so as the weeks have gone by, our business owners have been incredibly resilient and creative, the amazing people that we know they are, but they've had to change their business models and methods sometimes on a daily basis, and they have risen to these challenges, and they, that's a big, tall order to change your business model and your method of doing business when you've been in business sometimes for 163 years or 50 years or 10 years. So at this point, they figured out new ways to do business: online sales, curbside pickup, local delivery, shopping by appointment. They've all become essential practices, and those are practices that are going to need to stay in place for some months to come, because we just don't know, we don't know really how things will shake out. So as we've started to reopen, further challenges are presenting themselves, and the businesses are continuing to adjust. And as retailers, restaurants, and bars consider unlocking their doors, they want to be able to welcome guests, to serve them in a manner that's in accordance with the health and safety guidelines issued by the CDC, by the county. And of course, these guidelines include social distancing and limits on gathering size. And so yet that's another challenge. So we've been discussing as a group for a couple months now how we might think creatively, boldly, make some changes to the streetscape that will allow businesses to expand outside their walls and to keep their doors open literally and figuratively. So put simply, at this time, people need space and businesses need people. We reached out to Gould Evans, and they were more than excited. They were thrilled to take on this project. As Diane said, they are doing this, they have done this pro bono. They devoted a tremendous amount of time and energy to it. And they have been imagining with us and leading us along on this journey. And so our plan is to support businesses and continue to engage the community with downtown. We want we want everyone to know that we're open for business, but in different ways, and we need to do things differently. So they've done a marvelous job of developing a plan that provides the needed space, and it helps achieve these three goals. We want the people to be safe and empowered. We want the businesses to be safe and profitable. And we want the community to be seen and supported. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Whitney, who is the project manager, Whitney Lang, with Gould Evans Associates, and she will take you through the plan that we've developed.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Sally and Diane. I'm going to
share my screen. Can folks hear me okay and see my presentation?
Mayor Nanda, I can hear you, but I cannot, you're not sharing your screen currently.
All right, let's give that another try then. Okay.
There we go.
There we go. We're good? Well, as Diane and Sally said, my name is Whitney Lang. I'm an architect at Gould Evans. Thank you all for having us here this evening, and commissioners especially want to thank you for your powerful comments at the beginning of this meeting. They were quite moving. As Sally kind of teed up the conversation, oh, hang on a second. So let's figure out how it's wigging out on me too. There we go. Okay, did the slide change?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So as Sally summarized, our challenge right now is that people need space and businesses need people. And so as designers, we like to take challenges and turn them into opportunities. And so how can we use these facts and this knowledge to keep people healthy and to create a viable and vibrant future for our downtown business community? We are not the only community that is coming up with creative ideas right now. I'm sure all of you have seen headlines. They seem to come out every other day of different communities that are responding to the business needs. And, you know, this is coming from the businesses, from our local businesses. So as Sally and Diane both said, a lot of local businesses were coming to them just saying, help, we need help. What are we going to do? And so it became really clear that what was needed was a comprehensive plan that provided new opportunities, a streamlined approach to implementation, and it was a Lawrence-specific response given our local context. So about that point is when we got involved, and over the course of, gosh, a few pretty quick weeks here, we've had quite a few meetings with DLI, various downtown business owners, the great staff within the city of Lawrence, and through that process, we really created a framework. And so call these kind of the guiding principles or the requirements, but aspects of any design that we needed to be able to ensure that the plan accomplished. So embrace a culture of social distancing, support our businesses, restaurants and retail, that it's relatively quick to implement, incredibly sensitive to cost and even reusing what the city already has, allow curbside services to continue, which is just critical for a lot of our businesses right now, accessible to all, a comprehensive plan, maintain fire medical requirements, endorsed by our health department, and collaborative with our city engineers and with our police department, support our artists and provide community involvement opportunities. We don't know how long this is going to go on and if we may have other waves. So have it be at least viable for at least 18 months or longer if needed. And then again, a streamline and consistent city approval process, which Diane will speak to. So ironically, at about this time when we were putting this plan together, our city engineer sent us a document that their trade organization, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, had published to help guide city engineers about kind of these creative solutions. And I thought that this quote really kind of summarized kind of what we're trying to get at, that this requires that we reallocate our streets and sidewalks for public use during this crisis and for the future. And so we're going to talk about a few kind of kits of parts that are part of the master plan. And The first is recognizing that this is a change for our community. So signage and marketing and messaging campaign will be highly critical. Sanitation, making sanitation available for all. Hang on a second. Pocket parks or parklets that we'll talk about what those mean. Expanding our sidewalks, opportunities for special events, and then again the city policy changes. So we'll start getting into the Mass Street or just kind of downtown in general specific recommendations. And so as you see in this diagram, the yellow is Mass Street. And here we'll talk about the recommendations there to reconfigure our parking, expand the functional sidewalk width, and collectively that provides our businesses with more expansion opportunities. Downtown is much more than Mass Street, and so looking at the New Hampshire, Vermont numbered streets, that existing condition is parallel parking, and then our proposal of what we can do in those existing locations. So as we get into Massachusetts Street, this is kind of a diagram down the 800 block, just being used as an example. And what you'll see in this, probably the most noticeable change, is a proposal to go to parallel parking. We'll touch on that here in a minute. Providing a zone of 5-foot clearance will be important on the existing sidewalk for accessibility. In our presentation, we're referring to the utility zone, and that's that area where the sawtooth, trees, planters, and existing meters are today. ADA parking would remain as it is today. We would provide additional ramps as necessary, again, to ensure ability for all to move around downtown. And then there would actually be an opportunity for businesses to fill in kind of the curb cut at the saws to reclaim some additional space. So I want to elaborate a little bit on what led to kind of the bold move here with the parallel parking. And you know, today, about approximately 11% of our parking within downtown is on Mass Street. So while as a numerical value, it's not a high percentage, it's really valuable parking. And today, as I mentioned, our businesses are relying very heavily on curbside pickup. And so you put those kind of two feedback items together, and there was pretty broad consensus that purely closing down Mass Street during this time did not feel like the right approach for Lawrence, Kansas. In addition, the city engineering folks came out in support of parallel parking is deemed safer from a cyclist's perspective. And so ensuring that we're supporting alternative modes, you know, of transportation. So as we zoom in on the plan, we'll kind of start from the right and work our way out. You can see here this yellow zone that we have dashed in. This is to say that there would have to be a 5-foot clearance of sidewalk that is maintained for accessibility. Today, our current ordinances would allow a business to extend, I think it's 6 feet out of their business for a sidewalk, like sidewalk dining. And by taking advantage of the utility zone and then additionally providing the option of businesses to fill in the sawtooth, we could allow businesses 12 to 18 feet of expansion outside of their storefront. So that's, you know, 2 to 3 times potentially more space, recognizing there's existing things within that zone to work around trees and, you know, meters. And then we create a secondary circulation path that would run the length of Mass Street. So this ensures that opportunities for people to kind of step out of the way or just feel more comfortable, perhaps if you're walking to work and you're just kind of needing to move, you know that this is a zone that you can just walk pretty clearly in. We are working closely with the city staff on a permanent curb that it's actually a temporary curb that's permanently affixed that would come in and safely define the edge between parallel parking and pedestrians. Moving on to the streets around Massachusetts Street, where there already are parallel parking spaces, the proposal there is that in each of these cases, the businesses would have an opportunity, if they so choose, to take over some of their current parallel parking spaces and actually occupy that zone in what we're calling a parklet. The city is starting to work on what the kind of design parameters or requirements would be for those parklets. So that's detailed work that is continuing to happen. And then as our summer and fall unfolds, if there is a group that's interested in a special use permit to actually close down Mass Street, that still is going to be an option. In that case, it would go through the city's kind of standard procedures and policies they already have in place that kind of dictate the requirements for that special use. And, you know, as kind of word of the plan has started to get out there, what's I think been really exciting are just all the entities and businesses that are starting to come out and say, how can I help? So ham companies coming out and saying, well, we've built sanitation stations at a lot of our facilities. How can we help build them for Mass Street? You know, Watkins already coming out and talking about programming they're putting in place this summer to move outdoors. And then, as you can imagine, the Art Center is just pretty jazzed about the opportunities, especially you see some of those early images in the pedestrian zones, largely being an art canvas about how they could start collaborating and make it, in essence, a community-wide art project. So we know this is just the beginning of exciting collaborations and that there will be more to come. And so as Diane set up the conversation, she's going to take it from here and talk about the kind of the policies the city is working really hard on in support of the plan.
Thank you, Whitney. We appreciate your work on this and the work of your team. Again, this is Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager, and I'll walk you through our draft implementation outline for you this evening. And I'm going to share my screen here. Whitney, if you can stop sharing your screen, then I could share mine. There we go.
Diane, this is Mayor Ananda. I'm wondering if maybe your mic is a little obscured. You're much quieter than our last.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yeah. It's probably because my hand was on my mouse here. Thank you for that. All righty. Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the remarks, we've been working on this with Downtown and Gould Evans and really doing this work in a couple of short weeks. And there's been a lot of staff members involved in this process, and I want to thank them. We kind of came to the table with this and sort of said, hey, let's try and make this sausage together and kind of be open and collaborative about the different ideas from the beginning. And so that's really the plan that you see. And we found out there's a lot of details when you're making sausage, and that's the case. There's a lot of details that need to be addressed, and there's a number of things that still need to be addressed. But this is sort of our draft anyway. So I'll start out with a few of our comments and how we came to what you're seeing this evening. And from the staff's point of view, our lens that we're looking at this has to do with focusing on public safety, public accessibility, creating a fair process for the right-of-way space to be allocated, because this right-of-way is space that the city controls, but we know it's a very limited and important commodity that kind of is best addressed in a shared fashion to make sure that it's fair for everyone. And we want to make sure that there's appropriate responsibility for the right-of-way when another entity is using that. So the document that you have here, we posted late this afternoon, and I'll just walk you through that. First of all, the physical implementations of Mass Street changes. As Whitney mentioned, this involves the conversion of an existing 346 angled spaces. That number does include the 10 angled ADA spaces to 107 parallel parking spaces, plus we would maintain those 10 existing angled ADA spaces. At the very last document in your packet, there is a detailed cost estimate. And again, I want to have you take this with a bit of a grain of salt because our staff really did a good job in putting this together quickly, so it's high level. The total cost estimate that we are estimating, which includes materials, labor, equipment, demobilization, and also contingency, would be approximately $100,000. And so there's a variety of supplies that we need. Some of them are on hand, but some of them we would need to order and get in. So our estimate is from the time that the commission says go with this, is a 2 to 3 week installation time that includes the delivery time. So of that period of time, we're thinking 1 to 2 weeks to get materials in and 1 week of installation time. We've also been looking at the physical implementation of some changes on the downtown numbered streets, which we haven't figured at this time. We are still working on a possible framework for those side streets. We've really been focusing most of our time in looking at the changes on Massachusetts Street. And then with regard to sanitation stations, as was mentioned, downtown Lawrence is proposing establishing these stations along Massachusetts Street with 33 of them total. They would provide the stations themselves, but the city would provide the bottles of sanitizer that would be located at the station. We do have that sanitizer in supply, and we would be able to supply that. Our estimated initial cost of that would be under $500 for those fairly large bottles of sanitizer. Plus, we'll need to refill that sanitizer on an ongoing basis. What we're proposing is that this would be a temporary program. We would have a variety of business agreements that would be in place where you all would take some action to temporarily suspend or enable this program to proceed, suspend some of our typical requirements, for example, that would require a sidewalk dining license or doing dining in the right-of-way next to the building. So we're envisioning that we would come up with a proposed template of a business agreement that would be for the use of right-of-way in front of the business that we would process administratively without a fee. And that would make it on an equal footing with the program that you recently approved that enables other businesses in other parts of the community to get a temporary special use permit for this similar type of use in their parking lot. So this would enable a business to operate either retail and or dining within the area that would be kind of that typical sidewalk dining zone, if you will, the space that's close to the building, plus the expanded activity zone that Whitney showed you on the map. Our intention would be that these agreements would be processed as expeditiously as possible, which is what our need would be, coming up with a good template. Businesses would be responsible for any of the installations within that right-of-way that would be temporary with the program duration. So we'd like to contrast this to the typical sidewalk dining program that we have, where things are a permanent, more permanent installation. So any of the those platforms kind of between the sawtooth area and or the furniture that Whitney showed in her diagrams, those would all be things that the businesses would be responsible for installing and providing themselves. We want to make sure that they're doing that safely, and we want to make sure that that they're taking on that liability for operating within that zone. We're also researching a possible extension of the existing sidewalk dining licenses to enable that dining in the expanded area, as I mentioned. So how might we be able to put in front of you something that might grant those existing holders of sidewalk dining licenses something that would just blanket and let them be able to operate in that new zone. The other idea that we had was if a business has a neighboring business that for either its own business purposes didn't need the right-of-way space for activity, that would maybe let the neighboring business expand into that space with the approval of a neighboring business owner, or in the case of a vacant building, with approval of that property owner. So again, we're trying to set up something that makes it that it's just the space in front of that particular business, unless they can happen to work out something with their neighbor. We've identified several other issues that we wanted to at least mention and report on this evening. There was a question about smoking, the city's smoking ordinance as it relates to this expanded activity, and I just wanted to mention that the current city code does limit smoking within a 10-foot radius of any doorway, open window, or air intake into a building. So if things are outside that zone currently, that we cannot enforce no smoking in that area. So as our plan is that certainly that space that would be the new space would, this part of the code would not apply. So that may be something for you all to discuss and give us some feedback. Do you want that? Do you want that to be a no smoking zone during this temporary program? And then enforcement of the 15-minute parking space zones would be a soft enforcement. So we, our intention wouldn't be to monitor that. We want to make sure that the public knows the reason for the 15 minutes and for the reason to have it be rotating. So we would like to do that with education. And also the parking enforcement staff is planning to roll out a program where they're kind of in a downtown ambassador role during this time when we're not doing other parking enforcement. We do want to make sure that people know that there are plenty of parking opportunities, as Whitney mentioned, in the downtown area, which our data show. There's numerous parking lots on the Vermont street side, as well as New Hampshire, and as well as the garages that are on both of the streets. One issue that we identified as well is that we may need to make some space for construction debris dumpsters in the event of remodeling activity. As you know, unfortunately, we have a number of vacancies in the downtown. So during this temporary time, that may be a need that arises, and we may need to switch out one of those parking spaces in some way to enable that remodeling activity to happen. There's not a lot of alternative space for those large construction dumpsters to be anywhere other than the front of the building. We wanted to let you know that we have been sharing this out on social media and encourage people to review the plan that was going to be shared this evening. We did start a Lawrence Listen survey, and I provided a link to the survey there. That survey has been open since we posted these materials, and I believe we sent that on Friday. And there are several comments that have been made so far, and I'm sure that there'll be more between now and next week. As Whitney mentioned, we envision special event permit applications for parades or other special events would still be processed in our regular fashion if those opportunities present themselves. As for the duration of the program, we have discussed that a bit with downtown and Gould Evans as well. I think our suggestion would be that the program would last no later than the end of this calendar year, but could be sunset earlier for a review in the fall. I think that does several things. We will obviously know a lot more about the state of the pandemic by that time and the need for these temporary services. And also there may be a real fall off of demand for outside as it starts getting colder. And so that may be a practical reality that sets in as well. We know that we need to be flexible with this plan in case there's some unanticipated issues that might come up. And I also just want to mention that staff's suggestion at the commission's direction would be to schedule this item on your city commission agenda meeting for next week, where you would provide action direction for us. And so what we're looking for this evening is just this opportunity to present to you and get these ideas going. And if there's any questions or comments or direction that the commission may have for us, we're definitely interested in hearing that. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I know anyone else would as well.
Mayor Nanda, thank you, Diane, for that presentation. Sorry, I'm echoing. Makes it hard to talk. Are there any questions from commissioners for either of them?
Mayor, Commissioner Courtney Shipley, this might be for Whitney. Well, first of all, if I may, thank you very much for all of the creative work that you've done, and it's so amazing that Gould Evans was willing to do all this work with Downtown Lawrence and staff to come up with some creative solutions, so thank you. But also, did you at some time consider a one-way street by way of creating even more space, and was there an obstacle to that?
Yeah, we did consider that, Courtney. We actually also on the phone have Graham Smith. I'm sorry, what was that?
Can you say your name?
Yes, this is Whitney Lang with Gould Evans. We also on this call have Graham Smith, who leads our planning studio and is an urban planner. So Graham will probably jump in and help me with some of these questions. We did consider a one-way street, and it at the time seemed that just the logistics and kind of added complexity of turning a major thoroughfare into a one-way street just was deemed a little more complicated and involved than we could execute, within the time that we needed to get our businesses, kind of up and running.
This is Graham Smith with Gould Evans, and I would just echo what Whitney was saying. The logistics of creating a one-way street and reorienting the additional space that you would gain was much more daunting than the proposals that's before you. And so we thought with the relative ease of implementation made this a better option for that, as well as some other factors in trying to serve businesses and do other things.
Commissioner Larson here. I have a couple of questions. When I look at the pictures of the two separate walkways or sidewalks or whatever you want to call them, where it divides the business from the extra tables, it seems awkward to me to see that type of configuration as far as the ability to have traffic flow smoothly through those walkways. Why wouldn't we just extend the front of the storefronts to the edge of some part of our the properties there, the easements there, and then have the walkway next to where the parallel parking is only, and not have two separate walkways like that's projected now?
Yeah, this is Whitney Lang with Gould Evans, and I mean, Lisa, that's a really, really good comment. And if we were building this as new construction, that's probably exactly what we would be doing. But if we did that right now, we in essence wouldn't have accessible access to storefronts except for at the in blocks and mid blocks, because there would be the curb to step up onto. And so for that reason, it didn't feel like the appropriate solution.
I'm sorry, Mayor, this is Commissioner Shipley. I think you mean, Whitney, handicapped accessibility, not just general accessibility.
Correct, correct.
So Commissioner Larson here, so that, what I'm hearing then, based on those comments, is that because we have those walkways that are ADA compliant, that having a restaurant tables or whatever directly in front of the business is that would impede with that ADA requirement, or it just or what?
The businesses would still be allowed to come out onto the sidewalk, you know, like businesses do today with seating or retail racks. And then you'd have that 5-foot space for accessible traveling. And then, yes, on the other side of that, there would be an opportunity to pick up some additional area for retail display or tables and chairs.
This is Graham Smith with Gold Evans. Your current sidewalk structure allows you to socially distance as you walk up and down the street if necessary. However, one of the thoughts that we had was being able to allow businesses, retail, restaurants to spill out onto those sidewalks and make those usable in closer proximity to their storefronts was a valuable exercise or a valuable thing for those businesses. And so by doing that, we can, as Whitney said, create the walkway within the existing sidewalk, give the businesses some room to do some operations, and then create another walkway that's largely unencumbered, as much as unencumbered as you can be in that environment because of the sawtooth nature of the parking spots, and providing those socially distant areas for 2 separate walkways.
And Commissioner, this is Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I just wanted to add that maintaining that that 5-foot zone would be something that we would want to make sure to incorporate into the agreements, that the businesses would be responsible for maintaining that for the accessibility that was mentioned.
Okay. Okay.
This is Sally Zagrai with Downtown Lawrence. Commissioner Larson, are you wondering, with the ADA accessibility, because I'm watching your face and I'm wondering if we're not quite answering the question that you've asked. If we only have the accessibility at the end of the block and the middle of the block, say somebody wants to go to a business who's maybe using a wheelchair, that's in between those 2 points. You know, once you get in that zone, the blue utility zone, you can't get out of it until you reach the mid block, so then they'd have to turn around and come back. So it's harder for them to access businesses that aren't right at the corner or right at the mid block. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because they would have to step up the curb there where the saw.
Right, and they wouldn't be able to do that in a wheelchair. You know, I mean, if they're needing a ramp, then they can't access. So it's trying to create as much equal access for any mode of transport, any mode of mobility, I guess.
But don't they have, excuse me, Commissioner Larson here, don't they have to do that now, because there's the ADA access is only at the ends of the blocks as well as the middle of the block. Isn't that the situation today?
Right, but say you're getting on at 9th and Mass and you're heading north, and so you get on the, you know, you go across the street and you get on the sidewalk and you want to go to, say it is, oh, I don't know, the Antique Mall, which is between the mid-block crosswalk that has an ADA ramp and the 9th Street that has an ADA ramp. So you could just go right to the Antique Mall. But if you were in the, just with the utility zone, you'd have to go all the way to the mid-block and then come back.
Okay.
To the Antique Mall, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Sally. Lisa, Commissioner Larson here. Thank you, Sally.
Vice Mayor Finkeldye. Two questions related to that. So just to be clear, a business could not expand into what that walking zone, that blue painted zone. If they wanted to, we wouldn't give them the permit. That would be a dedicated walkway, right?
Correct. Whitney Lang with Gould Evans. That's correct, Brad.
Okay. And would, Commissioner Finkeldye again, would you have to build some platform within those sawtooths to use it? Or could you, if you had a creative way to use it without the platforms, could you proceed that way?
Whitney Lang, that's correct, Brad.
Guess I can take that. Whitney Lang with Gould Evans. You know, Brad, or Commissioner Finkeldye, I think that probably could be accommodated, you know, if the city ordinance were written so that 4 feet had to be maintained. You know, are you in essence asking could a business use the area that's at the same elevation as the blue zone as well as the raised? And you know, we haven't talked about that. Part of the sawtooth in those zones, and some places will need to be maintained for accessibility because of code requirements of wheelchair turnaround, but I think that could be looked at on a case-by-case basis based on a specific business's request.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldye. I do think we want to be as flexible as possible. I don't know what it would cost or take to build those, you know, fill those spaces, to fill in those sawtooths, but I could see a particular retail business, you know, maybe not wanting to use those all the time, but maybe just occasionally put something out underneath the trees, or put a display out on a given day, and would not want to go through the time and the expense of having to build those. So I just want to make sure we have the flexibility that they can use that space even without the filler.
Yes, Vice Mayor Finkeldye, this is Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. And yes, I think we're envisioning that they could use that space as long as they're within the parameters, and they could either build the platform or just use it as is.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldye. Diane, you had mentioned about people with a sidewalk license. So if you're a restaurant or a bar or somebody now who does not have a sidewalk license, would you have to first get a sidewalk license and then allow it to be expanded? Or is this going to be a special process where people who don't currently have a sidewalk dining license could get one quickly?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. Quickly is the answer. So we view the sidewalk dining license program as our permanent program. If you want to have a permanent installation, we're viewing this as a temporary program, and so that would not require them to go through all those requirements of a sidewalk dining license if they're just wanting a temporary use for sidewalk dining. The other thing we're trying to look at is there a way for us to have there be in the master action that the commission would take here, is there some way to grant existing sidewalk dining license holders some automatic ability to go into that expanded zone area? So those are some of the things that we're still trying to look at. try and make this as streamlined as possible. So more to come on that.
Vice Mayor Finkelstein, thank you.
Commissioner Larson here. We're talking a lot here about just the dining aspect of this. Does this also extend to just bars who don't serve food, that they can extend their table settings to outside of their building in the same fashion as a dining? And also extend that, is retail the same way? Are they going to be able to extend that out to in the same fashion as a dining establishment would?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. Our thought on the retail would be yes. And then the other issue that you're asking about with bars in the area, I'm going to defer to Sherry or Randy for help on this, because that starts to get into the liquor license issues.
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. The bar uses could be extended. They would have to, and Sherry can explain this better than I do, as she actually deals with the applications. They'd have to come back and pretty much expand the footprint or the area of their licensed premises with the state, and then come back to us, and then they might be able to do that if it was the commission's will. But Sherry can speak to that a little better than I can.
This is Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk. We're still looking at the options for this because there are some issues with extending a state license into a premise that isn't adjacent, and you would have to include that area where the liquor is served. I mean, even just carrying it from the physical location to that location, and there are some barrier requirements, and so how exactly that's going to work, we're still looking at all of our options. There have been some changes to state law in the last few years, and we don't have a definitive answer on how we're going to do that, but we are certainly looking at all of our options to allow that to happen.
Commissioner Larson, thank you, Sherry. Another question in regards to the alcohol aspect of it. Are we still going to allow the ability for bars to have drinks to go, like I think that's been happening now?
I believe this, I think that's the state, and I'll have to look at when that expires or if that expires, because I don't know that offhand. But that's not really something that would be based on state law.
Okay, thank you.
This is Commissioner Boley. I appreciate the work that you've been doing on this. One question is, I can see how cars would be using this, and I can see how pedestrians would be using it. How are bicycles going to be able to use this new plan safely?
This is Graham Smith with Gold Evans. There's a lot of study, a lot of research that's been done on bicycles in terms of their use in traffic, and the setting that you've created now and the setting that we're trying to create is really trying to keeping the speeds at such a reduced rate, trying to mix some of the activities so that everybody's more aware and paying more attention. And parallel parking, as somebody mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, is much safer than particularly angled parking that's head in. And so we think, by and large, the bicycles will continue to use Mass Street in traffic, and it will actually be a safer environment for them.
This is Commissioner Boley. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Larson here, could you expand on the last thought you said was regarding how it will be safer for bicycles?
Graham Smith with Gould Evans. So as I noted, there's a lot of research that's been done with regard to bikes in different contexts in terms of whether they should be in a dedicated lane, a parallel bike lane, or should they be accommodated in traffic. And what most of the research shows is that the lower the speeds, of the automobiles, the safer bikes are in the traffic lane and actually traveling with traffic is one aspect. The other aspect is when you have head-in parking where people are pulling headfirst into a parking lot or parking stall, excuse me, when they go to leave and they back out, as they're looking backwards, and in these times when a lot of people are looking through their rear view cameras, it's more difficult to see them as you're backing out, more difficult to see them coming from your peripheral vision as you're backing out. When you're in a parallel situation, after you enter the car, you've got your mirror to help you for people coming behind you, directly behind you, and they are adjacent to you, so they're closer. One of the studies that's been going on a lot lately is the actual idea of reverse angle parking, where you actually, when you park, you back into the parking spot. That way you're facing forward. When the bikes come by, you can see them much better because you're looking forward, and it just makes a safer situation. But parallel in this case is safe also.
This is Commissioner Bowley. What about opening doors on bicycles?
This is Graham Smith with Gould Evans. In terms of opening them into a bicycle lane, or
well, I mean, this is Commissioner Bowley. You parallel park, you open your door as a bicycle's driving by in the same direction, and you clip them with the open door. That's what I'm concerned about. One thing.
Yeah, this is Graham Smith with Gould Evans. So that is always a concern. However, again, at these lower speeds, the bicyclist can have the entire lane to travel in, so they don't have to be immediately adjacent to the car and the car door.
Commissioner Larson here. Could you, you said with lower speeds, did I miss that, what the speed limit was going to be? It's going to be lowered for that stretch of Mass Street?
This is Graham Smith with Gould Evans. No, Whitney, I may need your help. If my recollection is correct, it's posted 25.
Well, I think,
or anybody's help.
Yeah, sorry, Whitney Lang with Gould Evans. I do know that there was a comment that was a state law, and so to actually change that was maybe with outside of our parameters.
Right, and this is Graham Smith with Gould Evans. 25 and below is acceptable for accommodating bicycles in traffic.
This is Sally Zagar with Downtown Lawrence. Our posted speed limit on Mass, Vermont, and New Hampshire, and the downtown footprint is 20 miles per hour.
Thank you.
Commissioner Larson here. I'm looking at your presentation and where it shows the two separate walk areas, and the blue one, the light purple one, is indicated that it could be about up to 10 feet wide, from 4 to 6, 10 feet wide, 4 to 10 feet wide, excuse me. What would prevent bicycles from being able to use part of that lane if it is 10 foot wide?
Well, Whitney Lang with Gould Evans, that range is due to the sawtooth. And so that's why there's a range of dimensions. So it does seem in this case, because at the narrowest it's 4 feet, that it is safest for the bicyclist to remain in the street.
This is Commissioner Bowley. I could use some help with regard to our codes, but I don't believe that bicycles are allowed on sidewalks downtown. Is that correct?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager, correct.
So, Commissioner Larson here, so does that mean that walkway is considered a sidewalk now? It's, would we need to change our code to include that as actual sidewalk?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think that our overall plan would just designate that area as an additional walkway. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned is, as we get further with reopening, there's a little bit more acceptance of people walking in closer proximity to one another, but to the extent that people may still need the social distance, that additional sidewalk in addition to that yellow zone existing accessible area along the existing sidewalk. Kind of provides two areas of walking for people. So if there's a larger group coming in one direction, you know, you might have the opportunity to get off and walk in the other area.
Mayor Ananda, this is Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk, and I just wanted to clarify the point something I said earlier about the curbside sales. That is a policy that was put forth by the director of ABC. He has broad discretionary powers, and it's still in effect. So those curbside sales are still allowed. And I will follow up with them in light of this conversation just to see if they have any indication how long they're going to continue that policy.
Thank you.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldye. Diane, I want to talk a little bit about the 2 to 3 week implementation. Obviously, you know, we have to do this right, but obviously there's a lot of businesses trying to get moving as quickly as they can with some of these possibilities. Do you see a scenario in which any of this is piecemealed? For example, someone could get the right to expand into the sidewalk before we have the barriers to create the extra sidewalk, just so they can put something outside that they normally couldn't? A retailer, for example, just right outside the store? Or do you see this all happening at once, and that might not be till the end of June?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. Vice Mayor, honestly, I hadn't thought of the idea of, going ahead and allowing access on the sidewalk. I think that is something that we could discuss. I think there will need to be time for these agreements to get in place, with the business owners. So there's some of that working on those agreements and some of the physical changes that need to occur happening concurrently, if you will. So there's some of that is part of the overall implementation that needs to happen. But I think that we could discuss, whether a business could go ahead and get that agreement executed with us and operate in the sidewalk area and not expand into the larger area until that is in place, the expanded area by the parking.
Vice Mayor Finkel, I think, again, obviously we have to get some of those things in place, but I think there'd be people who'd want to use that if we can do it.
Mayor, I think my question is a little connected to Brad Finkeldye. This is Commissioner Shipley. Diane, and this might be also a question for MSO, some of what you're going to have to do will be striping in the street. So you're talking about doing things concurrently. Can you make mention of that?
Yeah, Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. Again, there are these physical changes that we mentioned, the painting in the street, and also the placement of these delineators and the rubber curbs that protect the area between the parallel parking and that walking zone, that purple walking zone that was on the map. And so those physical changes would need to be in place as well as the signage, for that piece to be able to be viable. And there's just time to put that in place. And I see Dave Wagner's here on the call, as well as Brandon McGuire. They may have some additional comments.
Yeah, Dave Wagner, Director for the MSO. We've been talking a lot about what the physical improvements would be, and we've also talking to Derek about the labor force it would take to do that. So while it's a fast track kind of a project, I think we've got some ideas on how to make it happen. And as everybody's mentioned, the MSO staff's been working in close coordination with Gould Evans on how to make that happen in a short time frame. So I think we're pretty confident we can get it done. Materials, it's going to be a little bit innovative and fast tracked, and that kind of thing if it comes off. But I think we're pretty excited about that, and I think we can make it happen. So I don't think there's any real obstacle to that, getting it done.
So Mayor Nanda, are there any other questions? Yes, Courtney. Commissioner Shipley.
Sorry, Commissioner Shipley. Thanks, Mayor. We haven't really talked very much about the use of the alleyway, and I hear a lot of concern about delivery. Of course, we have the 15-minute parking, but I didn't know if there was anything specific anyone had, some businesses have already been using the alleyway for pickup, for DoorDash or whoever, and then out front would be individual. Is there anything uniform you guys are thinking about, or is there anything you want to say about continuing with alley access way?
This is Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. We haven't discussed any changes to the existing alley program, so that usage would continue as it has been, which does function as delivery and pickup for a lot of businesses currently. There is one block of Massachusetts, the 600 block, that those alleys are, there's not an alley, and so there is a lane in the middle of Massachusetts that does serve as a delivery lane for several of the businesses along there. And I'll defer to Whitney, but I believe that that's accommodated within the plan for that particular block.
Whitney Lang with Gold Evans. Diane, that's correct.
Commissioner Larson here had a question regarding the businesses that are strictly bars. Sherry, you explained a little bit earlier about the need for bars would have to go back to the state to get their permit altered to allow them to potentially serve alcohol at a location that's not directly connected to their storefront. That's my understanding. So if they go back to the state and the state says, no, you can't do that, do we have any plans to allow them just to expand the front of their storefront so they can have outside seating for just drinking alcohol?
Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk. Randy and I are still currently looking at all the different sort of requirements and from the state to see what's possible. So our intention is to draft the appropriate agreements, ordinances, resolutions that we need to make sure they're in compliance, but give them those options. Again, we don't know exactly what that is at the moment. Anyone that extends their premise has to go back to the state. So even if when someone applies for a sidewalk dining license, they have to go, if they open their business and serve alcohol on our licensed premise, and they don't have a sidewalk dining area, when they apply for that, they have to extend their premise and go back to the state to include that premise. The same on private property if they were going to build a patio out back that they hadn't initially designated. So that's part of the process. What we still need to work through is that gap between their current service area and the parklet, and what exactly the requirements are for designating that space.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Larson. Thank you, Sherry.
This is Mayor Nanda. If I recall correctly, there was no public comment signed up for this item.
Sorry, Sherry,
no,
City Clerk.
I'm sorry, there are two people. I just went back to my notes. I wrote a note and I closed your email because I wrote it down. I apologize. So at this point, if there aren't any other questions, we will open it up for public comment. We have two individuals. First on the list is Emily Peterson. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Emily Peterson. I'm one of the owners and operators of Merchants Pub and Plate. I also serve on the board of Downtown Lawrence. I'm an East Lawrence resident. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank everybody for their work on this plan and to let everybody know of my enthusiastic support. I think, especially in this time, we need to be supporting small businesses more than ever. And this is an opportunity for us to be able to expand. To Sally's point, we need to be able to distance, and we need to be able to have people in our business to succeed. And this plan accomplishes those things. I also think it's important to note the symbiotic relationship of retail and restaurants. Some of the concerns I've heard are about retailers being concerned about not having as much access to parking. And if we don't have dining options for people downtown, we're going to significantly reduce the foot traffic, as we've already seen. And so we really need to think about that holistically, in my opinion. I think one supports the other. I also wanted to express my own personal sense of urgency about this issue. You know, we're coming up on hot July weather. We've got some students returning mid-June for athletics at KU. We've got PPP funds running out if we don't see some action from the Senate. And it's really important that we get this program going now so that we've got time to activate it and let it help our businesses. And then, you know, I hope as we explore this plan, we can continue talking, listening to, you know, our guests that are coming to join us downtown, listening to fellow business owners, residents of downtown, and improving upon it so we can see something like this flourish for the future.
Nanda, thank you. The second public comment that we have on this item is Chris Flowers. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers. I just want to ask, how will this affect like street performers and possibly the homeless that hang out downtown? I'm also going to say I'm against making it a no smoking zone just because I know some of the homeless people, they do smoke and they do hang out, so I don't want it affecting them too badly. I think this idea sounds pretty good, but I was also just wondering how many businesses are actually going to take part in it, because if I think it was what you said, around $100,000, like if the city spends $100,000 reconfiguring all this, I think we need to know that there's going to be enough businesses taking part in like you getting a business boost, I guess, that's worth at least $100,000. That's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. This is Mayor Nanda. We'll bring it back to the commission now. I did want to see, you know, as you're talking about the costs associated with this, I think that Chris brought up a good question is, are we looking at buy-in before we, you know, fill in those cutouts or engage in any of those costly features that we talked about? If a certain area did not want to participate in that, will we not then be doing that in those areas, or how do you think that might work?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think you know, the idea behind this plan is to have a uniform approach and kind of have a uniform shared new right-of-way area, and that parallel parking is also going to be really a shared commodity for the entire block. What we were trying to do with this is avoid the situation of having, you know, one-off applications where we had an application come forward for the entire use of all the parking, everything in front of one business that might be at the detriment of kind of the block as a whole. So I would say that we're trying to be responsive to all of the businesses with this plan and have a good level of conformity. And as to the interest from the business community, I think you've heard from a couple, and Sally would probably be the best to speak to what the potential demand might be from the business community and what she's hearing of that.
Thank you, Diane. This is Sally Zagrai with Downtown Lawrence. So obviously, and Emily makes a wonderful point, and she's a great representative for all of our downtown businesses and also for our restaurants. And then our board president is Cody Bates, and she and her husband Simon own the Burger Stand and Bon Bon and the Cider Gallery. And they are both key players in the Lawrence Restaurant Association. And so this has been a lot of discussion. I'm also, of course, contacted all the time by different businesses, and I've had several restaurants reach out to me directly. So we know that it makes sense for restaurants. They want to expand. And then when we talk about retail, I think that some will use it in sort of like a sidewalk sale, like a daily sidewalk sale. You'll see, some retailers, one comes to mind is Jock's Niche, that sells, KU gear and cheese gear, and they have always had racks out every day. And I spoke with the manager there soon after, really probably the first few days that non-essential businesses were allowed to reopen. And I said, well, how are you, controlling, who's touching things, because I'm becoming a germaphobe in my old age. But he said, well, they come in the store and they touch things. And so then I asked him, the next week, how are things going? And he said, the difference in sales when we have our racks out versus when we took them in is astronomical. And they have, now over a month's worth of data for that. So I do think we'll find more of that going on, because people won't have to, currently you would have to apply for a sidewalk sale permit, and it's only 3 days consecutively, no more than 12 days per year. So I think we'll see quite a few more. I know we'll see the restaurants out. And then we've been talking about barbershops a lot through this process, and kind of the way that their business operates. And one thing that we're seeing with barbershops, and of course salons and spas, is that those services, at the barbershops in particular, traditionally are walk-in services, right? You have 15, 20 minutes, you run in on your lunch hour, you get your hair cut. Well, now it all has to be by appointment only. Only the people who are having the services performed and the people performing the services can be in the business. So what does that lead to? It leads to a huge line of people on the sidewalk on the first day, that on June 18th, that downtown barbershop, I'm using them as an example because they're across the street from my office and I can see from my window, a big crowd of people waiting outside. So when we think about the expanded space, it's not just for retail and restaurant, it's for service providers that allows people to wait. It's also for restaurants to allow people to wait while they're waiting for their reservation. They can't take walk-ins in the same way that they used to. And they're encouraging people, don't come early for your reservation, or wait in your car and call us, and then we'll have your number, and then we'll let you know when your table's ready. So this gives more open air space for people to physically inhabit and be in. So it's got a lot of, there's some other purposes that don't show up as pointedly on the plans. So that's my 2 cents.
This is Mayor Nanda again. I appreciate that. I think that one thing that I'm tempted to want to explore is, as we work on our downtown master plan, we've experienced a lot of suggestions from our community about different kinds of configurations, all the way from Pearl Street in Boulder to something completely different. And what an unfortunate opportunity we have to kind of play with some of those ideas. And, I'm 100% acknowledging the amount of planning and effort that went into this suggestion. And I might regret saying it, but it might be an opportunity to kind of play with some of those other suggestions and see how they might play out downtown. I think about, the one-way street concept. It was a matter of time, not necessarily being able to configure something like that. And certainly bike safety is a concern for me, as I have teenage kids who think it's the utmost of cool to get to ride a bike, to get some ice cream, and they can get here downtown. And so there's, I think the opportunity to use that bike if we were to look at there are multiple ways of doing that. Anyway, I kind of wanted to just drop out there, the possibility that while we're in this time of experimentation and looking at what we can do, we could potentially think about trying out a few of those other things as well.
Mayor Ananda, this is Cody Bates, president of DLI, if I may too, if that's okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay. We've gone through several different versions of this, and one of the biggest things that we talked about was really making an equal opportunity for any business to participate. And I think the flexibility within those spaces, expansion spaces, really allows for businesses to try new things. And of course, making sure that the general public has a clear idea of what to expect when they come downtown, especially when we talk about parking and the perception of parking issues that already exist. And so I think that one of the things that we've really been adamant about too, and Gould Evans has been such an incredible partner in this, is developing a toolkit for businesses to give them ideas so they're not having to think of something completely different that they've pivoted over these last couple weeks. We're giving them tools to be able to take an idea and run with it, or have a resource for the expansion of the space for what their needs are, because as we all know, every business downtown has a different way to operate, and we want to make sure that we encourage that. And so I think what you're saying is so wonderful, that the exploration, I think, is still possible with this view in providing the public a clear idea of what to expect when they come downtown. But I think there's still so much room for flexibility depending on the type of business that we have. So that's definitely been a part of our conversation, is how can individual businesses or visitors participate in different ways, but also have clear expectations of what to expect when they do come downtown.
This is Mayor Ananda. I definitely take that point, which is why I was, very, very tentative in my comments of, the fatigue and crisis that everyone is experiencing as well. And they've been nimble for a long time. And so then to say, here's your opportunity, your big opportunity in the midst of a crisis, might not be the best timing, but it might be for some businesses. And so having that flexibility might be pretty important as we continue our master planning process. Anything else from commissioners on this item? We are just receiving this recommendation.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldye. I want to just talk a little bit about the cost, and I very much appreciate the cost analysis that was given to us by the city. I do think it's just worth noting for a second what makes up that cost. And it's $33,000 in material, $18,000 in personnel, which is our own personnel, $3,000 worth of equipment, and I think that's our own equipment. And so the total cost of installation is actually $56,000. They've added in $14,000 in contingency, and then $28,000 to take everything down again. And so I say all that because I've gotten a few comments like $100,000. Why don't you just give a little bit of money to each business? That'd be more helpful, or something like that. Really, the out-of-pocket expense is really about $33,000. The rest of it's internal cost within the city, which is real money, which is real dollars. But it's not like we're writing a check except for about $33,000 in equipment. I go on to say, I think this, I'm glad we have this presentation. I'm glad we're going to have some time to get other businesses and other folks in the community to speak out on it. Certainly I've heard from some people who say, don't do anything because we don't have enough parking, and I've heard lots of people say, well, just close down Mass Street, we don't need any of this. But I do think this is a good compromise. I think it's a good way to support all our businesses, and I really hope we can move forward with this next week, and then hopefully the staff can move quickly and make that 2 to 3 week deadline, implementation deadline, as short as possible once we make a final decision.
Commissioner Larson here. I would just want to echo what Commissioner Finkeldine said about moving quickly on this, and I also just want to emphasize that I appreciate everything that's been gone into this, and I know there's been tons of discussions around this for quite some time. And anything we can do to provide better support for our small businesses, obviously, I think is a good thing. I would just like to see us move quickly and be flexible for changes if something doesn't appear to be working like we had envisioned, and being able to make those changes quickly and accept them. I still, am interested in the idea of a one-way street, possibly. And then also, I just want to note, I do think it seems awkward to me the way they're proposing to set it up with the 2 sidewalks, but I understand the reasoning with the ADA compliance situation.
Mayor Nanda, does that satisfy staff moving forward?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. Yes, I think that's helpful to us, as well as the other discussion and questions that have come up here. So we'll be providing a lot more additional information as we get that available and before you next week. We would just ask to be patient with us. We're working on this as quickly as possible. There's a lot of details that are coming together here.
Mayor Nanda, thank you. Thank you for all your work. We are ready then to move on to commission items. Item 1 is any future agenda items that commissioners would like to add. I would like to talk about in our city manager's report the future agenda and work session items that have been listed, with some that are ready to go. I think it may be helpful if the commission provides some direction about when we would like to see those items that are ready to go, and we can do that here, or we can wait until we're in the city manager's report. I didn't know what the preference was for commissioners.
Yeah. However you want to handle it, Mayor. Commissioner Larson here.
We can wait until we're in the city manager's report, so we have those items pulled up. I just wanted to drop in there that I wanted to chat about those items. Are there any future work session items I would like to add?
This is Commissioner Bowley. I'd like to renew my suggestion that we consider inviting Professor Fox from Friends University to talk about the article that he had in the Journal World about government. I don't have much to say more than I did last time. Hopefully people had a chance to read the article and consider the suggestion.
Commissioner, thoughts on that item? Ms. Mayor Nanda?
Commissioner Larson, I would be open to having a discussion by Professor Fox.
Vice Mayor Finkeldine, I went back and read the article. Certainly a good article, and I'm happy to hear more.
Okay. So it sounds like that's maybe something that we can add for the future. Thank you for bringing that, Commissioner Bully. Any other work session items to add? Any other items? I have one item that I wanted to bring up in the consent agenda. The commission drafted a letter to Governor Kelly in regard to, sorry, my words are failing me, the moratorium on filing evictions for residents impacted by COVID-19. I think that that is an important letter. I think that I would encourage our county and other local governments to consider also writing a letter in support of that. Additionally, you know, I want to speak out to our local landlords who are in a position of being able to extend their process to individuals who are renting to them, even though the moratorium has been lifted at this point. There are people who are suffering in our community. We have a pretty extensive unemployment rate. We are taking steps to address houselessness in this community, and contributing to that is not the direction that we want to go. And certainly, at the very least, not including those late fees for folks who have been impacted by COVID-19. I know that there are some people who are not, you know, in the major business of property ownership and rental who might face also financial consequences for not collecting rent, regardless of whether or not someone is employed. However, any landlords who are able to do that voluntarily, I definitely encourage that.
This is Vice Mayor Finkelai. You know, one of the things we've rolled out recently, which I've been sending some constituents to, is the Lawrence Listens app and the ability to, you know, file concerns online and take pictures and, you know, really, you know, use the map locator. Anyway, it's really neat. And useful tool that people really seem to enjoy. I don't know if it's a sign of our times, but people like to take a picture of the tall grass and say, shouldn't someone be mowing this grass, or something like that. And anyway, obviously we launched it during a pretty difficult time of getting media attention, and there's a lot more important things going on. But as we move forward, whatever we can do, I think, to maybe reintroduce that or keep putting that out in front of people, I believe folks will find that to be a very useful tool. And I guess my only follow-up, and maybe this goes into the city manager's report, is I hope that over time we start to see some reports. It's pretty clear that that program must be able to generate reports about what types of complaints are being received and what response times and all of that, and I assume at some point we'll start seeing some reports like that going forward.
Mayor Nanda, thank you, Brad. Are there any other items? Okay, I believe that we are then ready to move on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Craig Owens, City Manager. Appreciate that. There's 4 items there, and I know we're going to talk about the future agenda work session items, and I really appreciate that direction. The top one is the building permits report, and I won't go through it, but just to say that we're still seeing a lot of activity in building permits and in construction activity. So that would be something that may be kind of surprising to people, but it is a piece of good news where people are spending their time making some improvements, I think, in their properties. But that kind of activity is helpful. The sales tax report was something we were all waiting with bated breath to get in. It's not a complex report in that it's about it's over 7% lower than last year in the same month. We luckily went into it in a very strong position, so we're for the period January through March, but it still is down, and we'll be waiting now for the next report, and that'll be very telling for us. Also, update on the climate action plan, which is an important thing that we're continuing to track and see progress on, and you'll see in the final item that we were going to get into, we do have an opportunity to make some progress significant progress with our renewable energies, and that's something we had planned to bring before you next week. So I've kind of taken us right through to the future agenda report where you wanted to be, but if we have any questions on any of the other reports, happy to answer those.
Mayor Nanda, thank you, Craig, for that information. Are there any questions? So looking at the agenda items that to be decided specifically, and I guess, looking at what we have coming up, there are several items on here that say this item is ready to be scheduled. 3 of those, and then other items as well, some of which are in June. I'm wondering if commissioners would like to have a conversation specifically about those 3 items when we're ready to have a conversation about those, when we want to get those on the agenda. I know that we have been holding off on these items because of kind of how we've been meeting, and we assume that there would be significant public comment. I think that at this point we have practiced in this format enough to be pretty nimble and provide that opportunity, although not ideal. But I would definitely like to see some movement on these issues, including the policies and practices concerning immigrants, the illegal camping and public right-of-way or public property issue, the land development code to increase occupancy limits for temporary shelters, and then long-term rental programs. Those are all ready to be scheduled, and I wanted to hear what commissioners thought about how we prioritize those. And obviously, I think particularly with the immigrants issue, we would need to speak with the organizers with whom we've been working on these issues about when they would be ready to come back, since it has been on hiatus. And so we would want staff to reach out to those folks to see when they're ready to move forward as well and consider that. But what are commissioners' thoughts on how we prioritize moving forward on these issues?
Commissioner Larson here. Do we have any idea of when we're considering going back to actually having the meetings in the city commission room?
The city manager, Craig Owens. It was no earlier than June 8th, but they, that is, depends on where Dr. Marcelino and the health department kind of had these congregation limits, and we're looking at that closely. And there may be other staff members that have some more to share on that. That would be, no earlier than our next meeting, but I think not knowing, having a certainty around that and expecting that it may take some time to get there. It'd be tough I think, for us to turn it around at this time, but I'll stay open to other contributions from our team. Porter, Sherry, Diane, you all were looking at it this afternoon, I know.
Yeah, Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think the challenge is with maybe some of the limits for gatherings is, what to expect in terms of a crowd, which we never quite know how many people might show up to a meeting, and just making sure that we're within those limits. So that was a bit of the challenge with proceeding here this month to change that format. And I don't know if Porter or Sherry have any additional to add.
This is Porter Arneal, and just along that line, Sherry and I talked about this today, and even though the numbers of gathering is increasing, our challenge here is the limitation of space and appropriate social distancing. And so that's something that's just kind of held us back, and we don't know yet how many people would want to stay virtual, and so there's just a lot of sort of gray area at this point, and our thinking is to hold the course while we are under this order until things start changing more drastically.
Right. This is Sherry Reedman, City Clerk. We also don't want to, we have 2 more meetings in June. We don't want to alter procedures too much to then change them again in July. And since we don't really see much change between if the current order stay from the health officer, and we think staying under our current process, even if we open up, we would still want to stick with sort of the modified procedures to still limit and discourage too much in-person public comment. So that gives people 2 more meetings to do as we are, and then July, we're changing into sort of a more back to normal. Obviously, all of that is based on the recommendations of Dr. Marcelino, but that's currently what we're thinking is July is before we'd want to make any big changes.
Commissioner Larson here. Mayor, I'm open to moving these items that you mentioned to put on the schedule sometime in the near future.
Mayor, I want to add one to your list. I don't think I heard you mention it, which is the Resolution 7312 for employer-employee relations to your list of things. I feel like it's been a long time, and I would hope staff has had a little bit of the last couple of months to make some movement on that. And so it's something I've been concerned about.
This is Mayor Nanda. On the list it says tentatively July. I didn't know if that was scheduling or because we're not prepared to discuss that yet.
Mayor, this is Casey Toomey. I'm happy to talk about that one. It's been a bit of both. That's been a large group, and so we've had to do Zoom calls, and getting everybody's schedule coordinated has been a challenge. We should be on board for that July timeframe, though.
Mayor, thank you.
This is Vice Mayor Finkeldine. Just kind of looking at a few of the items. I think Commissioner Shipley in the past has made a good point about the maybe juxtaposition of the long-term rental program and the short-term rental program, and how they have some overlapping qualities. So as I just kind of look at what we have, it looks like the short-term rentals is tentatively set for August. I think maybe as we're trying to space some of this out, maybe putting the long-term rentals somewhere close to that would be useful in the study session. Maybe the July study session before we take up short-term rentals in August, or maybe both of them in August, depending how that lines out. I mean, I do think, looking ahead, I don't know what's on our June 16th. It doesn't look like it's very heavy at the moment. I mean, maybe you could even do the illegal camping and the temporary shelters then, because they're ready to go. That leaves June to do a couple of those others, and then July for employees and single bag usage. That's just a thought.
One that is a priority for me, although I will say that might be a continued conversation given the charges given to our HRC and Community Police Review Board. But I do think that was at that point ready to go forward, and I would like to see that sooner than later, because it is, a restatement of activities that we're already doing in addition to another staff policy through the police department. So that to me would be a priority. I mean, none of these are not priorities, but one that I would like to see move forward sooner than later. And so I'm kind of hearing June and July, let's put some of these in as we are able, and certainly I think we've had a couple of commissioners talk about ones that we would certainly like to see rise to the top of this conversation. Are there any others that commissioners would like to prioritize or have conversation about?
Mayor, if I may, Craig Owen, City Manager, I want to check in with Sherry to see how she took down those notes before we leave you.
So, Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk, what I have is those items that are ready to be scheduled. You want us to start scheduling for June and July. I'm not sure where you all landed on the long-term and short-term rental, or if that was if you're wanting to start addressing that, because the items that are ready to be scheduled are the policies concerning immigrants, Ordinance 9754 regarding illegal camping, the temporary shelters, and then, I guess the long-term rental program is ready. So are those the four we're talking about?
Yeah. This is Mayor Ananda. I'm wondering if Ordinance 9754, temporary shelter ordinance, or limitations, there are three of them. I thought there were three of them. Those two could be put together for presentation. Would that be acceptable? Seeing some head shakes.
Could you restate it one more time, please, Mayor? This
Sure.
is Craig Owens.
So it's the second and third item, 9754 for illegal camping, and then the occupancy limits for temporary shelters and locations. Those two items seem to have some affinity with one another, and then the policies and practices concerning immigrants separately, and then the long-term rental program. Sherry, do you feel like that's helpful?
So those are three separate, obviously, you're talking about three separate agendas for those. And you,
okay. I don't know that they're necessarily three separate agendas, like three separate meetings in which they need to be discussed. But they would be three separate agenda items / pairs of items.
This is Sherry Reedman. Sorry. City Clerk. So those are three items that are priority, and that's leaving on those items that we already have marked for June and July on this list. You're good with those items, staying where they are.
So Mayor Nanda, I'm okay with that. Are any commissioners opposed to that?
Commissioner Larson here. Did I hear you say the long-term rental program, you're ready to have that scheduled, Mayor?
This Mayor Nanda, I think that that's a work session item, and none of these others are necessarily work session items. So it's my understanding that yes, that would be prepared to be a discussion in a work session.
Okay. Commissioner Larson here, because I do think it is related to the short-term rentals, and I don't know if there's any way to put those together, considering one's a work session and one's an actual voting item. But I do think they're similar in nature.
Mayor, if I didn't misunderstand, Vice Mayor Fingeldie. Sorry, this is Commissioner Shipley. I agree that also with Commissioner Larson that those things are related, but short-term rentals have already had study sessions on them, and long-term rentals haven't really in a very long time. So if I understood what Commissioner Fingeldie was saying, perhaps doing that perhaps as a study session before, and then discuss them both perhaps on a night later in August, if I understood what he was suggesting. Makes a little bit of sense to me.
This is Mayor Nanda, that's what I understood as well. Is that sufficient, Sherry?
I've got that down.
Craig, is that sufficient for you?
Craig Owens, City Manager. If Sherry's got it, we're good.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the City Manager's report? We are ready to move on to the calendar. Anything to discuss on the calendar? Okay. We're ready to adjourn.
Commissioner
Vice
Larson moved to adjourn.
Vice Mayor Finkeldine, second.
There's a motion from Commissioner Larson, a second from Vice Mayor Finkeldine. For a second there, I didn't think there was going to be one. Commissioner Larson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Finkeldine?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mr. Shipley? Aye. Mayor Ananda? Aye. We are unanimous and we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Thank you.